So good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this, what will be a very exciting and informative session about urban development, about transit-oriented development, and how the creation of spaces and transportation work together. I have the distinct honor of inviting to the stage County Commissioner Eileen Higgins, Director of Mobility for the City of Tampa, Bhide, and Miami-Dade County Transit Deputy Director, Javier Bustamante. Please come up to the stage. Thank you. So what I would like to do is just start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves and what they do and what their areas of responsibility are. And then we're going to get into some specific questions about transit-oriented development and what is happening now. And I think it's the theme of this year's CoMotion Miami conference is new reality, new opportunities. And I don't think any panel is more fitting for discussing new realities and new opportunities as this panel. So I'm very excited for it. And let's start with Commissioner Higgins.
Yes? Ooh, now I'm on. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Eileen Higgins. I am one of our county commissioners for District 5. Welcome to District 5. You happen to be sitting in it as we speak. At the county, I chair our Transportation and Planning Committee, and I have for, I guess, 6 years now. What makes me happy is working on projects that expand mass transit options. What makes me even happier is when people are living, working, or learning right next to where those transit hubs are. So they literally can completely live a car-free life with a new mobility option. So that's what I love to work on. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Thank you. Vic?
Sure. Happy to be here. I'm Bhide, Director of the Mobility Department for the City of Tampa. So I wear many hats: transportation, parking, stormwater. Parking and stormwater are very related to land use, of course, permitting as well. And occasionally when people ask Mayor Castor about technology, she will refer them to me. So smart cities, if you will, is part of that as well. What I love to work on is concurrent solutions, solving multiple problems at the same time. So land use, transportation, and resilience need to be looked at together, especially for Tampa's context, and they have so many synergies, and that's my passion. So,
Javi.
Hello. Thank you. Javier Bustamante, Assistant Director with the Department of Transportation and Public Works. And just like Vic, work on anything and everything that I'm asked to do. So anything in the right-of-way that happens in the right-of-way, which is most of our operations in the Department of Transportation, usually comes to me, from permitting to transit design and engineering to joint development, transit-oriented development, or better said, here in the county, we call them now transit-oriented communities, and we'll hear a little bit about those. So all of those come to me. So it's glad to hear that my colleague here from Tampa gets the same calls that I get. Anything and everything falls with us. So. Yes, and what I like to work on is getting projects unstuck, and from development projects to transportation projects, making sure that people can move with mobility in Miami-Dade County faster, and what I can do to get those projects and those visions realized.
And I'm Mitch Bierman, and I am a lawyer and a third-generation Miamian, and my family has watched this city grow for 100 years now. And it's been my pleasure throughout my career here to participate in these kinds of discussions and be part of the what I think of as the ongoing miraculous growth of this community. And I hope we're doing it the right way, and that's really what we're here to talk about today, is growth the right way. So I want to start off by asking each of our panelists to just tell me about something that is happening now or about to happen that you're really excited about. Start with Vic.
Sure. So Tampa is, of course, growing rapidly like Miami. A lot happening. We're a diverse economy. What I'm most excited about are three things. One is what our airport CEO, our new airport CEO said coming out of the gate, that he would like to extend some sort of transit outside of the airport and connect it to the city. That's really critical. We're very fortunate that our two major employment centers are within 4 miles of our airport, between downtown and the airport. So that's really exciting. We're working on that. We're actually starting an accelerator. The other thing is our streetcar system. So we've had new neighborhoods grow around our streetcar system that's made it very successful. We've got 1.4 million rides a year and growing, and we're extending that. So we're in project development, and we're extending it to a place that will connect additional TOD. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the third is our third largest jobs district, if you will, is the university area. And we've just funded fare-free transit service from downtown to that university area. So the goal is to connect the three big job centers and then bring housing to where the jobs are.
Okay. Eileen, what's really, really exciting right
Okay,
now?
what's really exciting for me is I am convinced I'm going to receive the $389 million from the federal government, I'm channeling here, to begin construction on the Northeast Corridor commuter rail line. For those of you that don't live here, we have pretty horrific traffic. And our zoning maybe has gotten ahead of our ability to move people around, but that also means on certain corridors, when we compete, when our projects are ready to compete at the federal level to get funded, they're ready, right? We do have people living near where we are planning to have future rail stops. And so that's very exciting. You'd be able to go basically from where we are here. If you wanted to have dinner in Wynwood, there'd be a rail stop. You wanted to shop in the design district, if you can afford it, you'd be able to stop there. And then if you wanted to visit our beautiful neighborhoods of Little Haiti, you'd be able to see them. So I really look forward to seeing that be a reality in the coming year.
So I'm going to follow up real quick. Is there going to be room for any transit-oriented development along the Northeast Corridor?
So
it seems like it's very dense already.
It's, quite frankly, the transit-oriented development is what is allowing the funding of the corridor. And I think any of us that work in the world of transportation, I see our transit CFO out there who always tries to help us pay for things. Transit isn't free. Even when it's fare-free, you've got to pay for it. And the capital expenses are often the easiest money to find, right? We can bond that out and pay that out over time. What we can't bond out is the operations and maintenance. We've got to pay that every year. And when you're talking heavy rail or commuter rail, it can be many millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars a year, depending on the length of the line. So what, with Melvin's help, I created a year ago what's called a transportation infrastructure investment district. And so on all of our transit corridors, those that exist today and those that we intend to exist tomorrow, all 25% of incremental property tax values goes into a trust fund that can, yes, be used to help bond out some of the capital, but more importantly, to pay for the O&M. So quite frankly, on this corridor, Mitch, as you know, there are many large developments that have already been built, but I can tell you the team from Miami-Dade Transit and Public Works, around these sites, they have very ably planned, even though a private owner may own it, it may not be public land, they're already working with these people about where the park and rides would be. Like, will we need some garage parking? And so the answer is some of that transit-oriented development already exists, some of it will be built, and certainly we have a North Miami Beach, which is another Haitian American community. They have a CRA up there, and the CRA will be investing in that area, both in office, development, housing, and that. So some of it exists, some of it is yet to exist, but all of it has been pretty capably planned for by the county.
Right. Javi, what are you most excited about?
And to follow up on the commissioner, the zoning's in place along the Northeast Corridor, and there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of development projects already being planned and redevelopment projects being planned. So it's gonna come, and some of it's there, some of the cities are already participating with the CRA, prepping for this corridor to come in, and it will come soon. Most excited is the, it is cool now to live around a transit corridor. That was not for our past 40 years. You wanted to get far away as much as you can from it. Projects would give us back houses. And so as you go up and down the US 1 corridor now, you see these buildings, and they're not fronting US 1, the heavy traffic, commercial districts. No, they're fronting the station, and they're directing their units, their commercial units, fronting towards the gates of the station versus the road. So that change in that dynamic and then that thinking of our development community to say, this has more value than the number of cars that are coming up and down the corridor, and has better future value, and I'm gonna invest my building and my front door to a station versus a roadway is a complete cultural shift. It's most excited.
All right. So Javi, I'm gonna start with you on this next round. We seem to have great transit-oriented development along the existing Metro Rail line. It sounds like there's a lot being planned for the extension of it along the BRT. But do we have adequate, I know we don't have adequate transportation, but are we thinking about westward transit-oriented development?
Sure, Mitch, and one of the examples there is the largest transit-oriented development that we do have is out west. And it's kind of like our Dayland, for those that live here in Miami, our Dayland of the West, which is known as Upland Park at Dolphin Mall. A lot of tourists come and visit the Dolphin Mall area. So just outside this large outlet that is very popular, there's a large project that the county was able to obtain this property. And we already had a terminal, express bus service out there on our bus terminal, and we were able to grab that property, that land, and along with the land where the terminal currently exists, and as we speak, 1,000 units are going into the ground, and that is our far west extremes of our county. So from the west to the north to the south to the east, transit-oriented development, we're not leaving any corridors untouched. And the excitement's there, and the development community's there to say, yeah, I'll try out west. It's not a heavy rail system. It's an express bus system. I see value in it, and I'm going to invest in that. And so it was a very competitive solicitation. We had great proposals, and the project is in the ground, and 1,000 units are coming up out of the ground.
All right. Eileen, are there other ways to encourage more TODs along the east-west routes that you can think of or that are in the works?
So to those of you that don't live here, quite frankly, our county was neglectful in developing housing along our Metro Rail corridor, right? If you went to any station, Coconut Grove being a great example, that was a 5-acre park and ride. Like, how can we have 5 acres of asphalt near a train station? It's just dumb. But we had lived like that for almost 40 years, and it takes a while to put these land use projects. So there actually are a lot of east-west transit-oriented developments happening as the Metro Rail heads out to the airport and also out to Hialeah. The city of Hialeah does an excellent job at making sure that their zoning encourages transit-oriented development along where the stations are. So Javi was giving one example, but at every single station, you're gonna see development. And a lot of that land is either owned by the city of Hialeah in their case, but a lot of it's owned by the county. And so these are public RFPs. And we put them out, and they're twofold. We're being very intentional, particularly some of our stations are in historically black neighborhoods and low-income neighborhoods, and one thing you have to be very careful about is that you're not gentrifying the neighbors out of the neighborhood, right? It has to be inclusive. And so RFPs are very specific that you have got to make sure that we have in many cases affordable, meaning low income, also workforce price housing, and that your development must be self-sustaining to have a 75 or 99-year lease, and you're still paying rent to the county. And then I know Javier negotiates very robustly to make sure that if there is a transit station there or a bus terminal, there's always bus stops at our train terminals, that all of those are renovated. Like, if a developer is going to have the benefit of living near transit, why should everybody else in the county have to pay to renovate that train station? They should pay to renovate for it. And so we have been very intentional in making sure the train stations are renovated, that there's affordable and workforce housing near every one of these stations in substantive quantities, not like 2 units, and that we are receiving rent so that we as the county are able to make sure we're maintaining and managing these facilities for the years to come. But we don't have the best east-west transportation other than bus. And with help from our friends at the Florida Department of Transportation, we have embarked upon a project to study the feasibility for an automatic people mover type of program out Flagler Street, all the way from downtown here, out across the Miami River, out to FIU. That is our highest ridership bus corridor. It is filled with low-income residents that are riding the bus, not because they think it's fabulous to ride the bus, but because they are too poor to have any other form of transportation, or they work somewhere where they can't afford the parking once they get there. And of course, Florida International University has a population of 100,000 during the day. Quite frankly, it's shameful that we built this beautiful thing without transportation, so we're trying to catch up on that corridor as well.
I'm going to add my 2 cents on that. I think, when my wife is an assistant dean at FIU in the law school.
She wants the train.
Well, not for her, but it's an educational necessity, because their program, the whole raison d'etre of FIU is workforce development for this community, and the internship and the practical experience is an essential part of that. But they're not getting that out west. They have to come east for that. And these are, like you said, these are not people who all have their own cars, or maybe they live with their parents and their parents are using the cars and they're taking the bus or a bike to get to work. But they need to be able to get back and forth quickly, and that commute during business hours can be more than an hour just
It's
even to
on
get
the
to
bus from
Davis.
FIU out here during business hours. It'll take you about an hour and 40 minutes to get here. And to Mitch's point, most of the the workforce development programs are happening at Miami-Dade College, not at the university, right? That's what Miami-Dade College is for, is to take people, prepare them as quickly and capably as possible to enter the workforce. But if you live out west and you're 2 hours away from class, and then your class ends at 9 o'clock, and then you're schlepping back in non-peak hours on the bus, it's a hard road to get a good education.
Right. So I think we've established that it's not that difficult, given the sea change that you've seen, Javi, to get a developer interest in a rail line. The rail line's fixed. It's not going anywhere. It's there for the rest of time, and it's got ridership, and so people want to develop along there. Vic, you've got your streetcar, but what does the city of Tampa or the Tampa Bay area do to encourage transit-oriented development off of that rail line along other corridors?
I think that's a really good question. So I'll answer it in 2 ways. One is first examine what public lands are available and how we can use those public lands to drive the kind of mobility that we want. And again, between land use and mobility, typically the land use, in my opinion, tells you how people will get around ultimately. So I mentioned downtown to the airport, or even Ybor City, where Brightline is going to come in to the airport. So between the city, the state, and shout out to Greg Slater, Executive Director of THEA, who's right here. And we're lucky to have Greg. I mean, in his experience and perspective, we've all identified properties that we can potentially develop for either intermodal centers or for city and county objectives, which is bringing housing where the jobs are. And in many cases, affordable housing. So 2 recent examples of that were, we have an RFP out right now to develop 2 parking lots into affordable housing with a minimum of 750 units and at least 60% affordable. And that's in our north downtown. It's an up-and-coming area. There's a lot of public lands there. It's right by the interstate and close to everything. The other is Rome Yards. That's already gone through the RFP process and is being redeveloped right now on the river, and we're building a river walk there. So really, it's leveraging land and then leveraging the amenities around that. So where we have Rome Yards, where we have additional affordable housing is on the other side of the river, the west side of the river, across from our current river walk. So we're building a whole new river walk on that side as well. That brings in more active transportation, better health outcomes, and direct access to jobs with other means than a car.
Excellent. I want to go back to the issue of gentrification. I think it's a theme that comes up at CoMotion constantly. We're all big advocates for improved mobility and improved development and a better and brighter built environment, but there is always a danger of displacing groups that have, consider these areas their home. And Miami has a shameful history of displacing thriving Black communities by putting in the interstate. Now, I would say that railroads and mass transit is a much more worthy use than an interstate or anything for rubber tire transportation, but at the same time, I think we want to protect communities. So how has Miami-Dade and then how has Tampa worked to protect communities that are going to be impacted by what is for almost everyone else an improvement?
I can start, I guess, it's funny where you and I are thinking long-term about the Northeast Corridor because it's in the future, but basically if you guys come back here in 4 or 5 months, you can ride our South Dade corridor. We'll be opening the country's longest all-electric BRT, gold standard BRT in the nation. So congratulations. I see like 100 people that helped us build that around CoMotion. But this is an example, to use the old adage, if you build it, they will come. Prior to the award of that funding, you could have driven down that corridor, and we had dedicated right-of-way, and there was basically nothing. It was a bunch of parking lots, kind of some warehouses on the back. And then there are a lot of historically Black neighborhoods down there with really crappy public housing. You all know the type, right? That was built 50, 60 years ago. Nobody should be living in them. They're horrific. And once we knew that we had the funding, thanks to local, federal, and state funding sources, that we were going to build this new BRT system, all of a sudden it changes the dynamic. Florida City, it's our most southern community. 40% of the people that live in that community live in poverty. They are also 40 miles away from good jobs and a 2-hour one-way commute. This is going to dramatically change their lifestyle, cutting probably 20 to 25 minutes, maybe even as much as 30 minutes each way on their commute. So you can save very low-income families an hour each way. So suddenly the county land and the county projects, it became more feasible. We have acres and acres of land, but could I really build 1,000 units 2 hours from jobs? I can't. Well, guess what? We are now. And so every single person that was living, we had very low density, and they were public housing. Every person got to live in their units, built entirely new buildings. They moved in, and then we're able to demolish the older ones. But you've got to do it in that order. Otherwise, people don't trust you, because you're right, Mitch. It used to be we just bulldoze Black neighborhoods, right? I-95, you can see the highway. There used to be 50,000. This was a bustling community of 50,000 Black residents, and now it isn't, right? Because literally, and there are pictures of the bulldozers just tearing people's homes apart. It's disgusting. So there is a lack of trust, and rightly so. But we have now proven that when we tell you you're going to get a new beautiful apartment with hurricane protected windows and it's going to be energy efficient and it's going to have air conditioning, we deliver on that. And so it is fascinating when you come down and choose to ride that. You are going to see development in the way that you've never had. And last time I was there, I actually saw a small office building, right? Because that's the ideal. That you're not talking about taking folks and bringing them always to jobs here, but that jobs are flowing both ways, that people are commuting both ways, and that economic opportunity is brought closer to where people live, that they're not always the ones doing the community. That opportunity is near where they live. And if we had not gotten this transit project approved and built so capably, that would not be happening.
Well, I would suggest that in addition to saving homes, we save cultural institutions and public art and public spaces. Those are all essential parts of quality of life for every community, regardless of their means. Javi, what do you see in terms of making sure that the impacts of these densifications along transit corridors don't disproportionately affect poorer or minority groups?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of new opportunities since this project was announced and commenced its construction. I can just off the top of my head think of we have 14 BRT stations, and along those 14 BR stations, we put in the appropriate zoning, the urban districts, and you're seeing these little communities around these BRT stations just grow with mid-rise apartments. Majority or all, probably are all affordable housing projects of different levels of just in medium income, from workforce to low affordable, and you're seeing these communities build around it. And now, because there's that density there, the Olive Gardens are moving in, and the Chipotles, because they need folks to be living in that area, not what used to be maybe just kind of desolate lots and stuff. So you're seeing these communities build around these 14 BRT stations that just one project got it going, and now this community is coming, and it's the folks moving into these buildings that used to live in these neighborhoods, moving into new affordable units, closer to live, work, and play, and they've got the play there, they live there, and they don't need to come all the way into downtown because there's other job opportunities happening in this corridor, just because of one project. Yeah.
Now, I suspect that I know that there's also an appetite for market rate residential close to transit that, just like, the Hudson Yards in New York is all transit-oriented development. I don't think there's anything affordable there. There's, $5,000 square foot. Are you seeing, Vic, in the Tampa area, a desire among market rate people who are looking for market rate residential to be in these transit-oriented development areas, and are you also doing things to protect those that can't pay market?
Absolutely, and that's a great question because affordable housing absolutely is necessary. Workforce housing, which is maybe a little more expensive relative to affordable housing, but attainable to many working populations, is critical. And so our downtown story kind of began with the Envision plan and the river, and then we had Waterworks, which was a type of development that Tampa Bay just hadn't seen. That scale and that kind of stature, seen in Miami previously, but that was new in Tampa. The big development that's happening now, closer to Ybor City, the historic district close to downtown, is Gasworks. And a lot of development in Gasworks is that workforce housing. It's very dense, it's mixed use, it's very close to multimodal transport, to transit options, things like that. And that is one example of what's happening, is more and more housing migrating towards where the jobs are. And our responsibility is to make sure it's somewhere between affordable, market rate, and attainable.
I'll give you an example. I was just going to say, last Wednesday, we celebrated the opening of a fabulous transit-oriented development project right near the Brickell Metro Rail Station. It's about a block away. Obviously in Brickell, high density is appropriate. It's a 29-story building. There's about 470 units in there. 93 of those units are for very low-income individuals. That means these people are paying $200 a month for their rent. There's another 75 units that are workforce, but for 80% of AMI, so pretty on the lower end of our workforce. And then the rest are market rate. And you walk into this building, it is so luxurious, it's ridiculous, right? There's massage chairs. I'm like, what? There's a beautiful pool. There's a barbecue area. There's a fantastic gym. It's one lobby, it's one entrance, it's one security, it's one set of landscaping. Nobody has any idea what anybody's income is. And we have been extremely intentional about writing RFPs to be mixed income because we don't want to concentrate poverty. When you concentrate poverty, nothing comes with it except the housing. There's no grocery stores, like as Javi was saying, there's no little restaurants, there's no way businesses locate there. When you build mixed income communities, you get thriving communities. So I was blown away by how fantastic this is, but this was another, we talk about, in our county, we do use transit-oriented communities versus transit-oriented development, because for me, it's not just where you live, work, and play, but it's where you live, work, play, and learn. And we had for many years been building quite densely near transit, but there were no school seats. So if people moved in and wanted to live a car-free existence, and believe me, with our traffic, we want people to give up their cars. But if they had a child and that child needed to go to school, they would have to buy a car and move away. And so now that project this fall will open a middle school, which means what used to be the elementary to middle school will become a full elementary school, and the middle school will be there. So you also have to make sure there's a learning component if you want to make sure people are able to give up their cars forever in these communities as well. But if you just are by the Brickell train station, it's called Magnus Brickell, walk in the lobby, you would think you were in whatever, the Upper East Side of Manhattan. That's how beautiful it is.
Next year's CoMotion.
I'm going to host it on the pool deck.
Leads a tour.
We'll give you a tour.
Eileen leads the tour of the best new state-of-the-art transit-oriented developments. I want to switch gears for a minute to talk a little bit about other concepts of mobility, and specifically pedestrian and bicycle or individual mobility along shared use properties. I noticed on a trip to Atlanta a few years ago how much really interesting arts and entertainment went up around the Beltway, which is not a traditional transportation corridor. It's designed specifically for walking and cycling. And whether we're able to do that here. I know we're doing something with the Ludlam Trail, and maybe there is some development going up at some of the major intersections along the Ludlam Trail. But are there other things that we could conceptualize here in Miami-Dade and Vic in Tampa where you have this kind of maybe taking over some kind of obsolete 19th century or early 20th century corridor and then repurposing that and then getting the sort of positive development around that?
Sure. So, and again, great point, because to the commissioner's point earlier, active transportation access between underserved communities that tend to be close to job centers helps that live, work, play dynamic in general. But one kind of moonshot project that we're looking at right now is we've got a CSX spur from our downtown all the way to Port Tampa, which runs diagonally through the South Tampa Peninsula, which is among the densest parts of Tampa. That rail corridor is currently owned by CSX, and they're down to 2 customers in Port Tampa. One of them is going to move away, and very soon that track will likely be less viable. So that's been out there. It's part of something that we're working with our stakeholders on. But the dream there is to, do a rails to trails, but not necessarily just the rails to trails, maybe trail and transit, something like that. But that has the potential to really transform and really work with some of the things that Greg is already working on with the expressway, which also runs along there. He's working on activating under the expressway as well. That's a huge opportunity for all of us to work on.
So even though it's unbearably hot here 6 months a year, and we actually get more rain than Seattle or any other city in the in the continent, people seem to want to walk and bike. What are we doing now to make that a better to offer that amenity?
I don't want to steal the commissioner's thunder, but she's been the champion
build
of
the
of
thunder.
the underline, so.
I just have the thunder.
Yeah, so we've got the underline that just built 2 out of 3 phases are complete and finishing. That's a 10-mile corridor of a trail. This was all our system. Our Metro Rail system runs on the old Flagler Railroad that ran all the way down to Key West, and luckily we built our corridor along the US 1 corridor, which was the old railroad corridor. So it went from rails to rails, and now a trail under portion of the Metro Rail is being utilized for the underlying beautiful project, if you guys have time to go out and visit it. And so that will connect to what we have, another 20 miles of the South Corridor has its own path there. And the idea is to continue that trail through there, connecting to the Ludlam Trail, which was a kind of another spur from another old rail that went out to the airport. So we have a great network of trails connecting. You've talked a little bit about the Ludlam Trail and how some of the commercial nodes have been built. I've visited some of those, and there's excitement and life at night next to these affordable housing units. So they have the trail plus the affordable housing units plus the nightlife happening in these trails that will soon connect to our underline and the rest of our trail network throughout the county has a very robust rails to trails or rails with trails program in place. So I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking about, I mean, we can't lie about it. We're not great. We're not a great place to bike, right? I see our friends from Transit Alliance out there nodding in agreement. But I think we've made strides, and the big projects like our Ludlam Trail, which is a trail to or rail to trail conversion, our Underline project, those are sort of what I would consider to be world-class projects. But I think in my time, I've built more, or we've approved, better description, more totally protected bike lanes in the city of Miami Beach. So when I arrived in this job, City of Miami Beach was not safe for biking, and now there are bike lanes all over. I mean, you really can cycle in the city of Miami Beach pretty successfully. We put the first protected bike lanes across the Venetian Causeway, so you can get from Miami Beach to the mainland. And then, quite frankly, I'm sure you've seen the Signature Bridge construction project going on, which it probably won't finish for another 5 years. But when that finally gets out of the way, meaning the construction, not the bridge, that frees up underneath, and we have really beautiful plans to be able to connect that cycling infrastructure from Miami Beach over onto the mainland. I think the next secret sauce, Mitch, is once we get that cleared and we see what's happening there, is how can we find a safe way to get cyclists across into Brickell where the underline starts. So we are not a great cycling culture. The streets, particularly in downtown, were built in a very skinny fashion. There's no alleys, which means all deliveries are happening up front. So at least in our downtown area, which is where you are here, we have very constrained right-of-way for cycling infrastructure. But we're doing our best.
Well,
If I could add to that real quick. I mean, signature trails are great. They bring a lot of people together. They change the culture of an area. But I'd also like to highlight the importance of just making sure that most of our streets have sidewalks. And at least in Tampa, that isn't the case today. Neighborhood streets. And bikeways are great, but also having neighborhood bikeways. So when you get out of your garage, when you get out of your condo, you have a way to travel safely. And those are some of the areas that are maybe less sexy, but that we've really focused on over the last 5 years within Tampa. And we've done everything from minor policy changes to removing loopholes from developers not building sidewalks when they rebuild homes and such, to using parking monies for a sidewalk repair program. And we've repaired 50% of existing sidewalks in 2 years. We either grind them or replace panels, and we'll be done in the next year and a half with the entire city. That's taking care of what we have. We have an additional 1,100 miles of sidewalk gaps within the city. And we've kind of categorized, critical versus not. And the critical gaps, we're doing those in gulps. $2-3 million RFQs at a time. But that is going to make the entire city much more resilient. We talk about redevelopment, we talk about new infrastructure, but really looking at communities and issues like displacement that you're talking about, rejuvenating cultural assets and rejuvenating basic public works facilities within neighborhoods as well.
Okay, so with our remaining minutes, I'd like to pivot to aesthetics for a minute. And we touched on it earlier with the discussion of gentrification and changing neighborhoods beyond recognition. There's, I think, always a danger with the densification that we desperately need in order to provide adequate shelter and adequate transportation to our populace, that we create these deep, canyons that really can be very uninviting and discourage cycling and walking and make people feel not the beauty of Florida, but that same sense of, what they left behind maybe in a industrial city to the north. So how do we mitigate that, and how do we protect the single-family home neighborhoods that abut these areas, especially along our main transit corridors? Because most of South Florida was developed as single-family neighborhoods in the post-war period, and now we're changing that. We need to. We have no choice. But what can we do to mitigate the aesthetic impacts?
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Whoever wants to.
Yeah, so in our RFPs, and I could say we haven't been perfect in the past, because we were so hyper-focused on getting a project and getting it out of the ground and getting development going. And so now we have the opportunity with the demand of development teams wanting to solicit the RFP and win. And so we've been able to turn that focus into ensuring compatibility with the neighborhood, ensuring proper walkability, accessibility, looking at the surroundings, grading in the RFP to those factors, not just can we get a project, can we get some rent for this thing? So focusing on some of those key elements that you're talking about and grading towards compatibility, ensuring scale, not just because the zoning allows you to go to whatever, looking at our neighborhood, working with our zoning department and ensuring, talking to our stakeholders and to the neighborhood and understanding what their needs and wants are, what they would want to see as their neighbor instead of a surface parking lot, and keeping that connection with the neighborhood and being able to grade towards that and select the appropriate development team based on a criteria of the RFP.
I think Javi mentioned an important word, and that's scale. And having that pedestrian scale, 2 to 3 stories, studies have shown that it naturally makes pedestrians and bicyclists feel more comfortable in those kind of neighborhoods. They're not overwhelmed. And that's the kind of density I think single-family neighborhoods can tolerate. So that lends to aesthetics as well, naturally, while bringing in the density. The other thing I would say is kind of looking back to our past and doing some things that we did right back then. And that is, do we really need to travel 5 to 6 miles to get groceries or a haircut or to a pharmacist? Or can we change our land development code to allow for these services to be 5, 6, 7 minutes away? And that is directly related to Vision Zero as well. You reduce the trip length, you change your modes, and that reduces your danger levels, basically. So these tenets all work together, kind of, back to where we kind of started this conversation. It's about doing all of these things at the same time intentionally.
Eileen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about, particularly when you're talking in areas that are very dense, I represent a lot of the most densely populated parts of the county, setbacks. The whole Department of Public Works, anyone sitting here knows that in every zoning hearing, when they approve a 6-foot sidewalk, I disapprove the 6-foot sidewalk and I require a 10-foot sidewalk, right? So they've stopped approving those. But 6-foot sidewalks are allowed. They should not be allowed in transit-oriented neighborhoods and pedestrian-centric neighborhoods, right? Because basically, if I have a carrito with my groceries in it, nobody else can get by me, and I don't feel safe, and I'm too close to the cars. So I do think that is something that needs to be considered that, quite frankly, we don't do a good job with. And it's not just the county. I'm sitting here as the county, but much of the zoning in our county is in the hands of our cities, right? And so setbacks, particularly in denser neighborhoods, make a huge difference on aesthetics because you feel like you have space versus you feel like you're in a canyon. And the other thing is landscaping, right? And I use that word particularly in dense areas here. And I would encourage you tonight, if you have time, you can see the difference between a street tree, and that's all there is, and landscaping. Because if you go up to Miami World Center, which is a beautiful special area plan that was envisioned by a particular developer to be very upscale. The sidewalks are extremely wide, and even though there's, I mean, believe whatever, whenever I say I want to plant a tree in downtown, there's no dirt under the sidewalk, right? I mean, right? Back me up on this. I'm like, can I put a tree or there's no dirt there? It's an FP&L vault. I'm like, really? All of downtown is an FP&L vault? But apparently it is. But you can build planters above ground and do amazing work. And so if you go look at the difference of Miami World Center, which is a mere 3 or 4 blocks here, and then you look at what the equivalent of new street trees look here, which would be the basic city code, it can be done in a way that is beautiful, but not all municipal codes require that. So it's possible, but it's not required.
Okay, so the Ministry of Minutes has given me a few more minutes. Do we have anybody, does anybody in the audience want to ask a question to anybody on the panel? Go ahead, Rahul.
Yeah, thank you for all the information you've shared. Rahul Gupta with PA Consulting. Commissioner, you just mentioned how some of the controls are with the city. So when you think about designing a system of systems, you have to work through planning, permitting, zoning, and all of the different elements before you get the desired outcome. I'd like to hear ideas how you propose actually aligning those things, because the consumer wants the end result, not hearing stories about how everything is not aligned. Thank you.
So at the county level, along our transit corridors, we have under our county charter a type of zoning called rapid transit zoning. And so near our stations, we have the ability to determine the zoning, which includes setbacks, includes tree canopy coverage, and as Javi was talking about, making sure you're tapering down, right? Obviously, you could build higher right next to the station, but as you're getting into what's going to be a single-family neighborhood, which could be as close as a quarter of a mile away, you've got to taper down. And so we have very distinct standards, and they vary by stop, right? What is considered low density in Brickell is a monstrous high rise on our South-Dade corridor. So for some of our stations, the maximum height might be 8 stories, right? And then you might taper down to a 2-story level as you go into the neighborhood. Whereas if you're in downtown or Brickell, you can be as high as you'd like. But we do, in these rapid transit zoning corridors, we control not just the zoning, but all of the permitting. So it's a one-stop shop for permitting along transit. Obviously, when you get out into the municipalities, into their jurisdiction, they have their own permitting systems, and some cities are super fast at that, and some other cities are not so much. And but at least on our transit corridors, and we have. When was that? Like 6 years ago, I said we're going to get better at permitting, particularly for affordable housing, and our permitting time has basically been cut in half at the county. And so the
5 days.
5 days. 5 days for this department. Some others are lagging in the 5 days. But it was not 5 days, it was 30 days 6 years ago to get a permit. And so we have very consciously said time is money. And by the way, time is housing, right? And so for every minute we are slow on permitting at Miami-Dade County, that is an extra minute, an extra week, an extra month where a person and a family doesn't have access to affordable housing. So we take it very, very seriously. And for those of the folks that work cross-jurisdictionally here in Miami-Dade County, will definitely say the county is the best permitting agency in the county.
Okay, so we started off with something that you're really excited about, something that's happening that's just great. I want to finish with something that you want to happen, something that where we want improvement, and where we can have improvement that would make a big difference. Eileen, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, well, you probably want it on transit development, but
It doesn't have to be.
I'll tell you things that we're working on, which are pretty important. And I have pretty substantial legislation coming forward, one of which is seawalls and seawall permitting. The county's seawall permitting process is, quite frankly, horrific. It takes forever, and permitting, not only is permitting the way to put people in a house, but permitting is so important. When you are slow rolling permits on seawalls, you are preventing us from caring about our environment in the next hurricane. And so that's the thing that I'm working on. That'll be presented basically next week, and I should have that taken care of, and hopefully we'll have seawalls being able to be accelerated much more dramatically.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about that. I had this conversation with my college student daughter who's taking a course in environmental justice, and I said that's an environmental justice issue here in South Florida, because the last places to get the seawalls replaced are the places that are most vulnerable in flood. And we saw that in New Orleans, and we see it here. Vic, what about you? What can we do? What should we do now?
To Tampa's context, I think, kind of similar to the topic of seawalls, having policies, real policies in place to redirect development from our coastal high hazard areas to higher ground. And fortunately for Tampa, that higher ground is between the airport and downtown. And so my other thing would be real public-private partnerships. I know that, across the pond, it's a very common thing to do development and transportation together. Here we've siloed those things out, but to bundle them and allocate risk appropriately, I think there's plenty of opportunities.
All right. Javi?
That, the new reality, the new opportunity is transit-oriented communities. And what I would want is obviously continue to build our corridors, our smart corridors, and continue to get the help from the development community, build along those corridors, built or unbuilt. And bringing that density along those well-planned corridors will bring that reality, be it heavy rail, some new technology. I know we're all in innovation today. But getting those corridors. The corridors are there for a reason. That's where folks need to move north, south, east, west. And continuing that new opportunity of getting development along those corridors and partnerships with the private development community to build these corridors are just going to accelerate us and get those projects today and not decades and decades away. So.
All right. Well, I like all of those ideas. I want to thank this panel. I want to thank you, the three of you, for participating, giving us a very stimulating hour of conversation about a really important topic and something that's extremely relevant to the new reality and new opportunities that we celebrate here at CoMotion. I want to thank CoMotion staff because they do an amazing job of making this incredibly easy for the presenters and making it extremely exciting and relevant for all of the attendees. It's been a pleasure, and thank you all very much for attending this session. I look forward to meeting all of you at the additional sessions and the social events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you guys are welcome back anytime. All right, folks, we are going to have a couple more sessions tonight. I know it's been a very long day, lots of exciting conversations. Careful, watch your step. Yeah, put your stuff right there. Okay. That's right. Watch your step.
The phone rang while
That was really nice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be getting started here in just a moment. Again, thank you all so much for hanging with us. We know it's been a long day full of exciting topics and conversations, but we will continue forward. Next, we have Building the Future Together, Evolving Partnerships in Micromobility. I'm super excited about this great panel. I'd like to welcome Carlos Cruz Casas, who many of you know from many events in the past. Thank you.
Excellent. Can you guys hear me? Let's start. Can we start? What do you mean?
There you go. You want me to take some pictures together?
Excellent. Do you guys have a microphone too? Yeah. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Excellent. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right? Yes. I know. How about Dimitri? Where is he hiding? No. All right. So, excellent. So let's get this conversation started, right? As we gather today with these leaders, both from the public sector and the private sector, I want to cut through the noise and actually get through what it would take to actually get micromobility and microtransit solutions viable and implemented in our cities, right? So let's actually get started with the paneling here. I want to quickly hear from you, right? Who you are, what do you do, right, and why you do that.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Valerie Nielsen. I'm the Executive Director of the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. We're the MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, for Palm Beach County, Florida, so just a little north of here. We plan, prioritize, and fund transportation projects with state and federal dollars. So we look out long-term over the next 25 years, where are we headed? This is one urbanized area as our region, so looking forward, how is our transportation system going to grow? How do we want to grow? And then prioritizing those funds over the next 5 years.
Excellent. How about you, Alex?
I'm Alex Esposito. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Circuit, and we're an on-demand shared electric shuttle service. So we work with cities and properties to build on-demand shared electric shuttle solutions that specialize in short trips. So using shared electric vehicles, teams of employee drivers, and an on-demand app. We focus on first last mile connections. We're pretty active here in Florida, Boca, Hollywood, West Palm Beach, about a dozen other cities, and then out in California and in the New York and Northeast area as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Dos Santos. I'm coming in from Raleigh, North Carolina, but previously lived in Toronto, Canada, and before that, Brazil. So bringing all of that experience to Raleigh. I lead the shared micromobility program in Raleigh, so responsible for the short-term strategy, the long-term strategy, thinking about how we can use data to communicate the impact of the program, and then also use data to deliver projects that have the greatest amount of impact.
Excellent, excellent. So now you know who is here. My name is Carlos Cruz Casas. I'm the Vice President of Mobility Innovation for T-Willin, leading the City Solutions team here in the South. But today is about our panelists, right? And I want to get started. Micromobility and microtransit, it has changed a lot over the years, right? For example, the first DOCS bike share system here in Miami was 2009. The dockless came in 2017, right? So it's put into perspective. Now, we're in 2025, and across the nation, MPOs plan looking 25 years ahead, right? That's what they do, and you're going to tell us a little bit more about that. But let's put into perspective, when we're planning for today, 25 years ago, that was year 2000. And I just have a few facts just for you guys to kind of put into perspective what happened in 2000, right? The first thing that we learned is that the world did not end with the Y2K. You got that, right? So 2000 was also where Britney Spears, Eminem, and Justin Timberlake were at the height of the popularity. Coldplay's first album came in June of 2000, right? Mobile phones started to appear. But not the one they have in your pockets. Is the one where everyone was playing Snake, right? It's a different perspective there, right? I just found out that a dozen of eggs actually costed 89 cents, so you know what it costs today, right? A lot has changed over the last 25 years, right? And I want to start with you, Valerie, because, you know, as you roll the MPO, how you manage that, right? And how you plan down the road, 25 years, and start thinking about all those micromobility, microtransit solutions into your region that far down the road.
Sure, thank you. So, yeah, the long-range plan, we update it every 5 years or as needed, but when we look at our region, and obviously a lot has changed, a lot of these new technologies have come in more recently, and they're really great for the solutions for first, last mile. When we look at these plans, we look at our roadway network, our freight network, our transit network, and maybe not, you don't always need a big bus to go around everywhere. Maybe you have a core network of frequent, reliable transit, and then you have these on-demand mobilities. They say that more than 50% of trips are within 1 to 3 miles. If everyone's driving and they're going to the grocery store, dropping off their kid at school, going to the post office, whatever they're doing on these errands, if we can create a comfortable and convenient and connected walking environment, biking environment, and kind of zone that connects to the major transit network, that's what we're trying to plan for. So we prioritize funding for the capital, for the infrastructure, the walking, biking, transit agencies, but having these partners being able to provide those solutions really helps. As a region here in South Florida, in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale urbanized area, all the way to my county, currently we're at over 6 million people. We're expected to grow by another 1 million people. If you're familiar with if you're from this area, you're familiar with it, we are environmentally, geographically constrained with the Atlantic Ocean, the Everglades, and as we grow, how are we going to move all these people? We've been planning for the past 40 years by just thinking about cars and making roads very wide so that people can drive fast along them. But as those roads fill up, we have to start thinking of ways to move people more efficiently and safely and connected. And not only that, not everyone wants to drive, and not everyone can drive. So some people are too old, too young, don't have the physical ability, it's too expensive. And in this area, and I'll just speak to our county, Palm Beach County, about 60% of household income is spent on transportation and housing combined. So that's a lot of your household income. If you're able to provide solutions where not everybody has to have a car or drive, you really alleviate that burden by having these other options to get around. And that's where these micromobility zones, walking, biking, having options really comes into play.
Yeah, definitely having a lot of options come into place, right? And we're not going to touch about how the Atlantic Ocean is actually trying to claim some of our land. That's for a separate conversation. But from planning to implementation, Hannah, and I think Valerie mentioned all the different options of mobility that are out there, and it sounds great, but it can be a messy business, right? And trying to get people in working together, right? So when I think about you from the city point of view, you work with local stakeholders, with residents, with administration, with elected officials. You work with other cities, with transit agencies. How do you manage the collaboration and those partnerships in order to execute some of your work?
It's a really difficult question, but I think something that we have honed in the past year is having a shared source of truth. And so I'll share a story to exemplify what I mean by that. We received some complaints last year related to scooter parking issues from residents. When we look at the number of formal complaints we received relative to the total number of trips, the complaints mean that 0.01% of trips led to a complaint. That isn't to say it wasn't an issue, but there was a disconnect between the narrative that we were hearing from the people that did complain and what the data that we had access to. And so we created a tool. We used a tool that the city already uses called See-Click-Fix, and we created a feature that would allow residents to issue a report, and so they could categorize if the issue was that the scooter was blocking a sidewalk path or if it was blocking a building entrance. There's different categories, and we configured it in a way that it goes directly to the operators, and the operator is able to respond to the complaint, and if the citizen files the complaint with their name, like they create an account on See-Click-Fix, they're able to be notified when it's closed. And so creating that layer of transparency and communication, and now when we're troubleshooting and co-ideating with operator solutions, we're able to look at the same data. When a report is issued, they get the information, we get the information, and so I think a big part of our work right now is just creating that shared source of truth so that when we're figuring out solutions, we're all coming from the same point of departure versus accessing or trying to troubleshoot problems with different data sets.
That's phenomenal, right? So sometimes we think about innovation is the creation of something new, right? But at the same time, it can be the creative combination of existing elements, right? So by taking some of the things you have in place, really being able to get to the bottom of this, right? So before we turn to Alex real quick, so there's a lot of changes that happen in micromobility and microtransit change very drastically. I wish we had a microphone in our green room where we're talking about the partnerships and actually how we can inspire others to see, right? So Valerie, I think you mentioned, the value of actually exposing folks to what's coming down the road. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. So as an MPO, we have a governing board of, in my case, 21 elected officials. I have one of my elected officials here, Councilmember Drucker from the city of Boca Raton. By having partnerships with different providers, different services. Circuit's been a huge partner to us. They actually provide service in Boca Raton. We're able to provide, we do mobile tours, we try to educate elected officials and stakeholders to experience these services and then be able to understand, to be able to take a transit trip or a bike trip or a micro on-demand trip and then see what that means and see how that works so that then maybe they can incorporate into their local plans. So by doing that, you're able to create more local champions and more advocates for this. Now, Councilmember Drucker, soon to be hopefully senator, she's an advocate and a champion for mobility. She even created a new director of mobility position in her city, mobility plan. They got Safe Streets for All grants. She's really taken it to the next level, but that's because of the elected officials getting them on board and getting them to experience and see these solutions and understand why we should look for more options.
So, and I think there's definitely value in that, and that's why we have a conference like this one, right? Getting public sector folks and private sector together to see what's coming down the road, to open their eyes a little bit what's the opportunities. Alex, the description of this panel talked about micromobility and microtransit, and for first and last mile connectivity, for congestion reduction and economic development, right? can you share an example of a successful partnership in your experience that directly contributed to one or more of these elements?
Yeah, so several. Our main use cases that we focus on are downtown congestion, downtown parking, first last mile connections to transit. And one that comes to mind, I was in West Palm Beach this morning and took our service to the train and then took the train down here. I could have stopped in Boca and used it there too, but I was thinking about our coverage area there, and we have a partnership that we've worked with Brightline. We have a partnership with the Downtown Development Association in West Palm Beach. They're very focused on reducing the demand for parking, encouraging economic activity downtown. Then we have obviously Brightline wants to get people to and from the train station. Then we work with a few hotels and offices, and then we also work with the city of West Palm Beach. And there's a fixed route service there, and their main goal is reducing the cost per rider and expanding access to transportation. But those are all separate partnerships. And what we've done is we've created a coverage area that includes the Tri-Rail station, that includes the major entertainment districts, that includes the Brightline station, that includes the Palm Trans station. And what I've learned with a lot of these public-private partnerships is a lot of times the public services aren't always communicating with one another, and there's efforts being duplicated. A lot of times private vendors, don't tell them about the scooter, take a circuit. At the end of the day, we want to get people out of their cars, and we want to show the types of options so we can encourage that multimodal behavior. And I don't think we don't need to sign a partnership with Tri-Rail to put the Tri-Rail station on our map. We want people to use that. We want people to be able to connect from those train stations. And similarly, with some of the scooter, even active mobility options, we want people to know about those too, because sometimes people might only want to bike one way, but then get a ride back, or they might take a scooter there and then it rains and they don't want to take a scooter back and they know circuits available. So I think there doesn't need to necessarily be formalized partnerships to be able to build something that's actually positively impacting all the different stakeholders that are involved.
Yeah, and Alex, I think we talk about in our prep call, you talk about let's allow everyone to bring forward the best of what they can do, right? Everyone has their strength, right? And I think you summarize here very well that micromobility and microtransit can coexist. And while someone might think that basically the overlap can take away, your needs change, right? Totally. Your needs change, right? Excellent. Now, looking ahead, just down the road, the CoMotion is about future, about bringing cities together with private sector. What are some of the innovative or perhaps underutilized partnerships, right? Models that you believe hold significant potential for advancing micromobility and microtransit goals?
I think collaboration is one. I mean, Valerie, does an amazing job at the TPA. TPA is not a formal partner of Circuit, but we get to work and meet a lot of different cities at the events that she hosts and know about what's going on in the area. I think the other thing that we are seeing more of is some of these more collaborative efforts. So we work with in DC with the Mobility Innovation District, where they've invited multiple vendors into one area. NYSERDA has run some great programs in New York we've been fortunate to be a part of. And so I do think there's sort of there's no silver bullet in transportation. So to your earlier point, who's good at what? And I think it's better that we all focus on our strengths than try to be okay at a bunch of things. So I think there's still a lot more opportunity there. And I think the other thing is to not be naive and get a hotel to try to dump a bunch of money into a city's mobility plan, because hotels sell rooms and nights. But if they're willing to fund a service for their property that helps them sell rooms and nights, and that service being available means that hotel's not pulling more demand from the public system, then that's a net good thing for the community by encouraging, that group. And that's just one example, but I think a lot of times you don't have to force all these things together, but you want to align on, the goals and initiatives to see that if there's certain tactics that can be used that help solve or improve some of those other types of goals.
Excellent. How about you, Hannah? Anything that we're missing there?
I think so. Something that in the micromobility space that we're really focusing on is co-ideation early on. And so I think there was a panel earlier today that talked about how critical co-ideation is. And so when we're troubleshooting solutions, as opposed to going to the vendors and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, it's bringing them early on and say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Have you tried this in other cities? Is it working? How should we adapt it to the local context? So I think it's seeing them as collaborators very early on. It's something we already do in our department internally whenever we have a project. So for example, we're going to expand micromobility corrals. I talk to transit, I talk to parking, I talk to water, I talk to waste collection, so that whatever we end up implementing doesn't negatively impact the other services that we deliver in the city. So I think co-ideation is the future. People have expertise in areas that you are not going to have expertise into, and the only way forward is bringing that expertise early on so that you don't repeat mistakes that they could have already foreseen.
If you haven't seen the corrals that they do in Raleigh, you take a look at that. It's definitely very colorful, and really, I think it's a sense of place, right, and belonging for the community, right. So even bringing the community on board towards that. So Valerie, anything to add in terms of what are we missing in terms of these kind of collaborations and partnerships?
I guess to build off the co-ideation, it really helps to be able to point to other examples that are working well. So it does help when you ask people, do you know about this? Or even when you travel or you see something, what's working. In our county, we actually, so Circuit started in West Palm, now we're in several cities in the county because, people are like, oh, what is that? And then they start learning more about it. But just an example when talking about facilities, we have this year, the TPA has funded, and one just got completed, the other one is underway, the first ever separated bike lane on a county and on a DOT road in our county. Those agencies said, we don't do that, and I had to point to Tampa and St. Pete and other areas that the DOT district did do it, or the city did do it, because they're like, well, that's not Florida. And it's like, actually, yes, we do have this in Florida. So those two are underway. The DOT road is really exciting because it was just a 4-foot sidewalk, no bike facility, one of our highest crash corridors, and now it's gonna have shared use paths, separated bike lanes, mid-block crossing, so a huge success story by maybe co-ideation and by educating people what it is and where, look, it works, it's working here. So I think that really helps to have those ideas. And I see the Dutch embassy, the Kingdom of the Netherlands here, but we Miami-Dade TPO, Broward MPO, and our MPO most recently, we've actually have learned from them on their best practices in the Netherlands, how they were able to transform, and in Paris too, how they've been able to transform from a car-oriented environment to a multi-choice environment, right? So that they can have a more sustainable future, a more accessible future for all, and people can age in place and live happy and healthy and safe lives. So it's really great. There's a lot of great examples out there. We're not the first to have challenges, but as all these new technologies keep evolving, you really got to stay tuned to what's happening and where it's working to be able to bring that locally.
Phenomenal. You can see, right, just experiencing what others have done and to really understand that things are feasible. Actually, we can get those things done. Ultimately, we focus on the outcomes and what we're trying to achieve, and basically just belong to a city, be part of that, and participating is one of the key factors of that. We have a few more minutes. I just want to basically, definitely, open it up to the room. If you have any questions, yes, Javi. And then we go. Your mic or just be loud. All right.
Thank you. So Javier Betancourt with the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust of Miami-Dade County, overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. So as I see the title here, first of all, great panel, so thank you for all the information. When we talk about partnerships, and I know it doesn't always have to be formalized, to your point, Alex, but there are structures where you can bring parties together in the public, nonprofit, and private sectors to further common goals. And I know we don't have them here in Miami-Dade County, but I know, for instance, in Palm Beach, you have a TMA, a Transportation Management Association. Not sure if you have them in Raleigh. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on TMAs to act as a vehicle for bringing multiple parties together around advancing common mobility goals, especially around microtransit and micromobility in general. Thank you.
Is that for me?
Whoever wants to answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think creating that central knowledge share is important, and oftentimes TMAs do a great job. When you have a state, a county, a city, sometimes special districts, and then private sector, all with their own, ideas and plans, it's a full-time job to just figure out, all of those, how they line up, what's happening when and where. And I think a TMA, can help there. And I think a TMA can also help encourage the private sector to encourage, commuting habits of some of their, whether it's guests or workers. And so I think they're really helpful organizations from a knowledge share and an outreach and a marketing perspective. And so we've had a good experience. I think the challenge can be when you try to do a lot of things and you have a lot of stakeholders involved, and then it can be difficult to prioritize things and get everyone to agree.
Excellent. Before we go to the question in the back, I think to add to that real quick, the benefit is basically identifying a common goal between those entities, right? And to your point, let's not try to solve the entire thing. Let's just pick 1 or 2, 3 things and get those done. Great question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Karolina Hachulska, woman in automotive technology, and my question is about mini mobility. So we have micromobility, which is, this kick scooters or bikes, but this type of technology might not be good for a mom who has to drop off a kid at school, and maybe, she wants to be protected from rain and things like that. So I know that there isn't that many vehicles on the road yet. So think about it as a scooter, but it's maybe protected. Maybe it has doors and so on and so forth. But I was wondering whether this is even on your planning horizon, because this type of vehicles might be a little bit too big for a bike lane, but they're too small for a regular lane. So I was just wondering whether you're thinking about mini mobility as you're planning for future.
I'm definitely thinking about it. A lot of my friends are entering that age of having kids. So that's something that's on our radar, and it's something that I've also raised to vendors and asking them if they're thinking of building devices that have like a child seat, so caregivers, aunts, whoever can bring the children with them on those micromobility trips. We have some examples in the States, Cargo B-Cycle in Boston, where they have the cargo bike share. I think there are challenges in getting cargo bikes to like that kind of cargo bike at scale. But I think those conversations are happening. It's something that's on my radar, and my dream would be for micromobility to allow all caregivers to be able to use them as well.
I think or do we want to go into another question? Okay, I was just going to say, in terms of planning, we're seeing more demand and more communities trying to ask for wider, those shared use paths, but they have to be wide enough to allow for small vehicles and the mom with the stroller and the bike and all these things together. So there's starting to be like more planned communities. But when you look kind of into the future and you look at somewhere like the Netherlands, you see they have mobility lanes. So anyone that's going, there's the cars, then there's the sidewalks, but then there's these lanes that anyone that's going under 20 miles an hour or so, whether it's a electric wheelchair or a mom with the bikes or the people, all these different things, and they have the cargo bikes with the kids and the rain shield and the whole thing over there. They have a whole network of that, and so it's really interesting to see that and start thinking about into the future.
And I'm fascinated about that this is not only about people movement. We already see it even in Paris and some of the places you went, how parcel movement and freight is actually moving in this direction, right? And I think that can start pushing the approach from both the private side and the individual movement to actually get cities and agencies moving in that direction. Yes, sir?
Yes, hi. Jonathan Braddock. I'm with DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit. One of the things, of course, we focus heavily on is customer experience, and through our mobile application, we can tie a lot of our light on-demand and micromobility together into one place. So I'm curious to the municipalities represented here, could you speak upon how you foresee that in your communities growing and the needs that you might have with at customer experience?
I don't know if I'm maybe answering it correctly or not. When I think about customer experience, my agency, we don't own or operate anything. However, we try to educate people on how to ride and how to make things seamless. One thing that Miami-Dade has done really well, and speaking of the TMA in West Palm Beach, that's something that West Palm Beach Go has helped fund, is people want a streamlined experience. So whether, as a customer, you want to be able to, wherever I go, personally, I like to use Transit app. And then I can plan my trip across all the different modes, and the more agencies allow their data to be out there, but it doesn't matter which app or which thing you're trying to use. If you have options and they're just seamless, and all your options are in one place, that makes the customer experience, at least for planning your trip and taking your trip and buying your ticket, much more seamless. We were in Paris, and I just used the Uber app to rent a Lime bike, and I didn't have to download one more app and enter my credit card information, the whole thing. So the more seamless you can make it, the more one-stop shop and options that you have, the better. But that's just when I think of customer experience as someone trying to get people on board with transit and taking all these different modes. It's hard to download one more app or try to figure it out. Like one planning thing helps. Yeah. So I don't know, you're more customer service.
I just wanted to add one thing. So this is something also that's on our radar, and it's part of the See Click Fix feature, is creating that feedback loop. I think there's an opportunity there for the innovators to help cities create this seamless feedback loop where, we're getting live feedback on how people are finding the scooters, how are they finding the bike share operations, and that's something we're thinking about as we think about the next iteration of the program. How can we have this continuous feedback loop? We do have surveys that we give out, but those are sort of static, and I think the ideal scenario would be to have that constant feedback loop, so that as the service is being delivered, we can have conversations with operators and see where trends are going.
All right. So we are at time. Before I ask you to put your hands together, is there anything that we're missing? One last word that you want to share?
I'll just mention the importance of partnerships. Alex did mention Tri-Rail, but Tri-Rail, for example, is our commuter rail in our region, and they've been such an amazing partner for us. When we do these mobile tours, they allow us to go on their train. We're doing, with even in Boca Raton, a new TOD, a transit-oriented development there, partnerships with the micromobility, with on-demand. Just the more partnerships we can have and really get people to experience things, the better.
Phenomenal. Well, with that, please join me in thanking this panel. Amazing. Thank you.
All right, we're going to do a quick group photo. We do have scheduled a very quick break, but we are going to try to stay on track. So if y'all want to stick around for a couple more minutes, we'll be getting started our next panel shortly. It's autonomous mobility at scale, safety, policy, and the real world deployment. We're going to start that in about 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Call you again.
The whole 25-year, the 25.
Thank you, brother. That's good. I'll start here and then move there. Thank you. There you go. Do you kick it open? Do you start it? Yeah, if you want to, it's fine.
Let me give 2 more minutes.
Yeah. It's good. I'm gonna give it 2 this morning. Oh, thanks, man. Oh, Glideways. I heard about you guys. Yeah. When we're done, we'll talk for a minute. Yeah, if you're around. I do. All right. Hey, everybody, we got about 2 minutes. Bring all your friends in. Let's fill this place up. All right. Here we go. Yeah. That's good, man. Yeah. I posted that little video. And I said, the break is on the sun. I'm your PR man. Yeah, exactly. It's a mutual admiration society, whatever they call it. Actually, you want to get a good picture of us before we get started?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we know it's been a long day. We've got a very exciting panel coming up now. I want to thank you all for coming and sticking with us. We are now getting ready for our autonomous mobility at scale safety policy. This is really important, guys. I want everyone to come on in, fill up the room, and listen to this super exciting presentation. I'm going to go ahead now and hand it over to our moderator.
Hey, everybody, come on in. If you're in the back, come right up, sit up front. It's not church. You don't have to be afraid. Come right up and sit down in the front 3 rows. Yeah. We won't call you out. My dad was a pastor, and when I would be sitting in the back, I'd be looking at books, and he'd snap his finger, and I'd be looking up, Paul, come to the front. So I always had bad experiences there. But anyway, great to see you all here. This is a really, like she said, this is a great, important topic on autonomous vehicles. You heard a lot about them a few years ago, and they've coming back on by a storm, and these are some of the leaders in our industry that are making it happen. I'm Paul Comfort. I'm the host of Transit Unplugged, the world's leading transit executive podcast, heard in 100 countries. We're going on our 8th year now. We also have a TV show, Transit Unplugged TV, and I spent 30 years in the public transit industry and ended up as CEO of the MTA in Baltimore. And these folks here, Nat especially, is a good friend of mine. He actually was chair of APTA when I was on the board of APTA and was CEO of the MTA in Baltimore. And so it's always an honor to be on with him. Autonomous vehicles. I had a great opportunity. In the role of the podcast, I would go all over the world and interview people, and I got to go to Neuhausen, Switzerland about 7 years ago and see what at the time called, CNN called it, the world's first autonomous vehicle in regular public transportation at the Neuhausen Falls. And my company was involved in it, and they nicknamed it Trapezio. And I got to ride it. It went all around like this. It's Europe's largest waterfalls. Phenomenal. I can't believe where they had it operating. But it was around the streets. It was great. It was a very interesting experience. It was kind of jolty. I don't know if they still do that, Nat, but Yeah, very jolty, you know, but they got a lot better than. And then a few years ago, actually, it's when Jaime and I first got our start together. We went to Jacksonville Transit and got to see their operation there, which is the Autonomous Vehicle Test and Learn facility, where Nat's group was testing autonomous vehicles and sending back feedback to the OEMs and to make better vehicles for our industry. So today he's going to give us an update on that and what they're doing with it. So autonomous vehicles up until now have basically been pilots. Everywhere they're doing it, it's a pilot. What we're going to talk about today is how do we take it to scale? How do we really ramp this up and make it so that they can actually become an active part of regular public transportation systems? How will they serve transit, logistics, paratransit without leaving communities behind? And how do policymakers and innovators align on infrastructure, regulations, and long-term deployment? So today with us to talk about it, as I mentioned, is Nat Ford, our distinguished leader from Jacksonville Transit Authority. Let's welcome him. Next to him is Jerice Rodriguez. She's the interim chief of paratransit ops at Miami-Dade County. She's our host. Jerice, thank you. Welcome. And a really interesting company that hopefully you'll learn a lot about today, Ron Thaniel, Senior Director in Policy and Regulatory Affairs for Zoox. Let's welcome him. All right, and then at the end of today, stay around to the very end, we're going to unveil for you in our 8th year the whole brand new branding for the Transit Unplugged podcast. You'll be the first people in the world to see it if you're in this room, other than him. I showed it to him earlier today. But anyway, so let's get into it. All right. Are you ready? And we'll have time for Q&A too. I'll keep some time for Q&A, so hold your questions and we'll get them at the very end. All right, Nat, let's start with you. So Nat's got something called the Ultimate Urban Circulator. I love that, dude. Yeah. Tell us about that and what's happening. You just opened up a brand new facility. I mean, you got a lot going on.
Well, first, thank you all for joining us today. I know it's 4:30 and it's been a long day, but thank you for being with us and hanging in there. And thank you, Paul, for inviting me to be part of this panel. So the Ultimate Urban Circulator, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of how we ended up where we are today. We have antiquated Skyway people mover system in downtown Jacksonville. Was built around the same time as the Metro mover here. Unfortunately, we did not have the success in Jacksonville with our automated people mover. It got stunted, so to speak, or didn't get built out to the full 10-mile system. It only went to 2.5 miles. And when I joined the Jacksonville Transportation Authority about 12 years ago, it was a subject of a lot of criticism. With federal funding being part of the development of that project, we couldn't abandon it or walk away. We had to keep it in a state of good repair. And then fast forward to 2015, we put together a Skyway Advisory Committee, and they gave us the tall task of finding a way to modernize it and expand it to the full 10-mile commitment that was made to the public. Challenge is that APM system was not being supported by the original manufacturer, and then also to extend from 2.5 miles to a 10-mile system. I think many of us in this room would be retired and long gone by the time we were able to complete a project like that, and wouldn't really benefit the development in downtown Jacksonville. We, as the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, we do road building as well as public transit. And we were starting to really study and examine in our road projects the development of smart corridors, smart roads, and all of the connectivity between vehicles and infrastructure, infrastructure to vehicles, vehicles to vehicles. You all know the nomenclature. And out of that came the concept of the U2C, which was at grade to extend the Skyway system at grade using autonomous vehicles, but at the same time develop the conversion of the Skyway, our elevated automated people mover system, back to a roadway at elevation, and then through either a series of spirals, ramps, or elevators, be able to take the vehicles from street level up to the aerial structure, thereby protecting the federal investment, as well as taking advantage of infrastructure that still had, a great deal of useful life left into it. And so phase 1, which is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. We're about 2 months away from cutting the ribbon on that operation. I see I'm applauding there. You think you're applauding. I tell people I had a lot more hair on my head and I was a lot taller when I started this project, but it started in earnest in 2019. Paul, you referenced the test and learn facility. We started that in about 2017. A test and learn facility went through 8 different vehicle platforms. We created what was called the Golden 20 because a lot of the focus was in the mobility of the vehicles, technological capabilities of vehicles, but what was being left out is ADA, accessibility, and a lot of things that if you're in public transportation, it's pretty straightforward for us, but it wasn't so straightforward for a lot of the tech companies that we were working with. So Bay Street Innovation Corridor, 3.5-mile at-grade corridor from downtown Jacksonville out to the sports and entertainment complex on the east side of downtown Jacksonville. Total of 14 vehicles. Due to Buy America, we had to retrofit Ford E-Transit vans because of a build grant we received in 2019. And we went through those paces with Beep, who is our service provider. And it was a very busy week 2 weeks ago. You mentioned the Automation and Innovation Center, which will be our command center for operating the vehicles with a control center, as well as maintaining and charging the vehicles for this corridor. Also, in that same week that we did the ribbon cutting, we actually awarded a 5-year operate and maintain contract to Beep to continue operating the service for the next 5 years. And then a reservation with Holon, and I know we'll talk about that, a reservation for 100 vehicles, which we believe will be necessary as we go into phase 2 and phase 3 of the 10-mile system. So a great deal of activity in the last 2 weeks, and as it's exciting times for us at the JTA. And thank you for inviting me again, Paul, to speak to the audience.
Absolutely. Nat is for the public transit industry, which I think I can speak for. Nat is our leader in autonomous vehicles. He really is the pioneer out front and is leading the way for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I cared passionately about paratransit. I spent 5 years at WMATA managing their paratransit system right before I went to MTA. And Jerice runs the paratransit system here in Miami. And that's always been a question, right? How are you going to use an autonomous vehicle in ADA paratransit? All right, Jerice, tell us.
First, thank you everybody for having me here. It's an honor for me to share the stage with this innovator and leaders that are now shaping mobility, particularly paratransit and in general mobility. To me, I think, and I see this like opportunity, and I'm happy to be living at this moment in time, an opportunity that we have the advancing technology, that we have these new service delivery models that if we know how to coordinate them correctly, if we know how to apply them properly, we can get us closer and closer to close that equity and accessibility gap in mobility. So I think that we need to embrace autonomous vehicles. We need to embrace this technology because actually it can elevate the experience of the rider. It can provide more flexible mobility options. I think, to me, paratransit is close to my heart. Paratransit to me is a critical service in the mobility ecosystem, in the transportation system, because for many paratransit is not only an option, it's an essential tool to achieve their potential in life. As a mother of 5 years old in the spectrum of autism, I want my son to have every single tool available to reach his potential. And now is the opportunity for us to take technology, to take apply and integrate correctly, properly, the emerging service delivery models that we have to create that world. And I think one of the things that, contrary to the perception of the people, is autonomous vehicles now, for example, we can elevate the rider experience by just changing the role of the operator. I think far from removing a driver or operator from an autonomous vehicle, we should keep it, but redefine the role. Now that we don't have an operator or driver focusing on the road, we can have someone that can't act like an attendant, like a companion, that can't provide that superior, I would say, service, and helping and supporting someone in the paratransit journey, and in general to everyone. And then at the same time that we are elevating the rider's experience, we also creating employment opportunities for people that maybe they don't meet the requirements for a commercial driving, but they now can excel providing support and excelling in providing a better experience for the paratransit users. And at the same time, what I see, and based on our pilots here in Miami-Dade with the autonomous shuttle service at the zoo, with the delivery robots, with the microtransit autonomous vehicle rides that we are providing with Metro Connect. Everything is possible with technology. We have now, if we coordinate properly and we plan properly, the technology, with the sensory monitoring system that we have, the adaptive system that we do have, the real-time dynamically routing system that we have, and the many other technology, if we combine everything, we can now provide for someone in paratransit opportunities, mobility, freedom, like providing the chance for a same-day trips. We can provide real-time information for them to take better and informed decisions. Now we're providing here, we're increasing the possibilities for someone in paratransit, and that helps us bring us closer to that equity in mobility that we are everybody's looking for. In addition, I think it will bring a safer environment, because with all this technology, we can make our trips quicker and safer for everybody. And also, if we do apply all this technology with autonomous vehicles, we will be operating more efficiently. We can expand our fleet. We can be more efficient in increasing the ridership, making that experience, that user experience, a better experience, and also at a lower cost. So I think we need to embrace autonomous vehicles instead of being afraid of them, thinking that it's taking away a lot. We actually can just redefine the roles of everybody around and make it a better service for everybody.
Very good, thank you. So we've got a transit agency who is ready to put them in use on a big way at scale. Paratransit saying they're possible to use it in paratransit. Now let's talk to a manufacturer operator, Ron Thaniel, who runs, who's a bigwig at Zoox. His title is Senior Director, Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Zoox. Have you ever heard? How many of you heard of Zoox before? All right, you all are in the know.
That's good.
All right,
That's
Ron,
good, yeah.
give them what you all do, man. This is amazing.
All right. Well, first of all, Paul, thank you so much. Thank you also for CoMotion team inviting me back. It's always good being back here among transit, urban mobility folks. So a little bit about Zoox. As Paul mentioned, I'm Ron Thaniel, Senior Director, Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Zoox. We are an Amazon independent subsidiary. We are reimagining, working with cities, what urban mobility can be like. We are moving away from unsustainable urban environments in many ways in the last century to a city where I believe we all want. That is a city that is walkable, livable, focuses on equity, sustainability. And that's what we're doing at Zoox. We have the first ground-up purpose-built robotaxi operating anywhere in the world. It is no longer 2017, 2018 when we were talking about test tracks, test beds. I was there. I worked on legislation in Congress. This is 2025. And we have meaningful deployments taking place across this country, including with Zoox. We have our purpose-built robotaxi operating in Las Vegas on the Strip. Wide roads. The resorts are complex mini cities. We have our robotaxi operating in San Francisco, the second most dense city in the country. We have our test fleet, and I'm so happy to say we're right here in Miami with our test fleet. Of course, Austin, Seattle, and as of 2 weeks ago, Los Angeles. This is no longer 2017. This is 2025, and it's happening. And what we're doing with this technology, and I'm a city guy. I spent my entire career advising mayors, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I ran NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials. I worked for a governor, Cuomo, who saw himself as a mayor of New York City. What we're doing is giving cities that tool to reimagine our roads. The way I see this, you're gonna ride our Zoox vehicle, you're gonna get on a bus, subway, you're gonna walk, you're gonna get on bike share, What you will not have to do in a dense urban core is drive your personal automobile. That's the future I want at the end of the day. You know, we have come a long ways in this country on the technology front. Not just Zooks. We have what we call our fellow travelers with meaningful commercial deployments in this country. We're going to talk about regulatory requirements. It's needed. We're going to talk about the relationship with cities, that critical partner. We're going to talk about the opportunities that this technology will provide cities. I'm here for a reason. I'm a product of Baltimore. Baltimore. We have that connection there. Baltimore. And I remember growing up in that city, I'm a diehard Ravens fan still, by the way, that if you didn't have a car, or if you didn't live on a transit line, you were out of luck. You missed out on opportunities to make your life better, your family, their lives better. What we're doing with autonomous mobility as a service is we're reaching out to communities that have been left out, the transit deserts, provide that opportunity to get to work, education. This is incredible. I cannot stay in bed in the morning. Cheyenne knows that. You know, what we're doing here, and as a person who never owned a car until 2020, as a true city person, we're going to reimagine how this whole thing works. And we're not a shuttle. I want to be very clear about that. This is a robo-taxi, 75 miles an hour. We can operate on highways and very complex urban environments. And so from a safety standpoint, that's key. We say safety is foundational at Zooks. We don't say it's first. It's foundational in everything that we do. We're going to give cities that opportunity through autonomous mobility. We know, one, an AV does not drive distracted, does not drive impaired, does not drive tired. Think about how we can help reduce the number of fatalities and injuries on our roadways. And we know firsthand that in low-income, poor, minority communities, you have a higher fatality rate as well. I get to the infrastructure issue. This technology is a game changer. And so I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
What a panel, huh? Good stuff, man. All right, Nat, so you ran the Test and Learn facility. Yes. What did you learn from that, especially when it comes to public's kind of, you've seen the surveys, right? People are afraid it's going to be Minority Report, right? That the vehicle's going to get taken over, hacked, or whatever. Nobody wants to ride a vehicle without a steering wheel. They want to be able to jump up there and grab it if they have to. What have you learned about all that?
Well, Paul, I appreciate that question because that has been the most challenging part of this project, has been the public acceptance piece. And I'm talking about, our average citizen or customer who uses our conventional transit system, all the way to some very sophisticated elected officials that, and I applaud any work that anyone's doing in this space around the country because it's helping to validate that we're heading in the right direction. What I've always said in terms of these autonomous vehicles is not a question of if, it's a question of when. But the big challenge is, and we saw this with the Test and Learn facility, prior to actually getting on one of the vehicles and seeing it in operation, we did pre-surveys and then post-surveys. Pre-surveys, folks are scared, they don't understand the technology, the complexity of these systems, and then after they ride the vehicle, then it becomes a conversation that, well, how soon are we going to get this project up and running? How soon am I going to be able to see this in my neighborhood? And what's taking so long? And part of that is the educational process of this, which is it's not your typical brick and mortar or concrete type of project where you see construction and a crane and things of that nature. So one, the educational process in terms of the reality of the technology. Two, also the curve of development to develop these projects and deploy, I think to your point, Ron, in a safe fashion, right? So we're not going to rush to prove a point. We're going to take the time and do the due diligence to ensure we have a safe deployment. But the educational componentry of this project has been far greater than I've seen with any other project. People understand light rail. They understand a bus, BRT. They understand all of these other different modes that we've been operating for decades. But here we're getting into uncharted territory, and we've found that a great deal of investment in what we called road shows and agile plans. The road shows were even taking the vehicle statically and putting them at Jaguar games or taking them to Duval County Public Schools and actually taking students and young people onto the vehicles and then complementing that with what we called agile plans, where we did the Mayo Clinic during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we actually, in partnership with the Mayo Clinic, moved COVID-19 test samples from their drive-through testing over to their laboratory about a mile away and level 4 autonomy. Not moving people, but showing a use case using some of the test vehicles that were in our test and learn program. That got us national and then international awards and recognition. So that was a win that particularly caught the attention of our Chamber of Commerce in Jacksonville. They were like, okay, there's something here in terms of this program and what it did to actually help our community survive the pandemic. We also did a number of agile plans where we actually set up, pilot tests, 1 to 2 mile type of pilots. We did that with Florida State College at Jacksonville. We did it during a lunchtime kind of ride autonomous vehicle pilot that we did in a specific business corridor where we knew a lot of our influencers were actually living and working in that corridor. But that level of what I call agile plans, it actually took a lot of horsepower away from the group that were working on delivering the permanent program. So I did not estimate the amount of external, outside of the project, type of advocacy that we had to do, everything from Rotary Club meetings to churches and you name it. We were out there actually advocating on the technology to continue to have the support for the local investment in terms of the project. And we're not done. I mean, even with cutting the ribbon a couple of weeks ago, some folks are still kind of, is this real? Is it really going to happen? And there's still some non-believers out there that we hope to convert. But it's very important, the work that is being done throughout the country around these autonomous vehicles. And every so often when something happens out there, we have to be pretty well versed, because if something happens in California with a Waymo vehicle that's autonomous, it gets across the country literally within a couple of hours, and then I'll get a phone call and have to explain why what happened with that particular incident isn't going to be replicated in terms of my project in Jacksonville. So a lot more public-facing engagement than I've ever had to encounter with the hundreds of projects I've delivered over my career.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something?
Yes.
I cannot agree more with you.
Yes.
We are I feel you. We have here, and it has been a great experience since we started in 2016. We started having a series of pilots, autonomous vehicle pilots, involving the community. Because if you don't involve the community, that won't be successful. And after having delivery robots on the street, after having the shuttle service at the zoo, and then when we were ready to deploy the MetroConnect autonomous vehicles, it to me was really surprising that people at that moment, when we have their focus groups and everything, they were not surprised or worried about autonomous vehicles. Actually, they were more concerned about the interaction inside the vehicle and the circulation itself, because they felt comfortable, because they were exposed and they were in the conversation from the very beginning. And then they started having trust in the county in terms of these projects, because that was not the first, that was the third where we involved. We have people going to the community liaisons going to the communities where we were deploying. We have people coming to our location to see the vehicles, the robots, the shuttle, testing it and making comments. And I think when you get that and that conversation is easy to deploy and have a successful deployment and service, it makes me so happy that we can agree, and I completely agree. We need to include them, and after that, we need to continue informing them about how it works and the changes that we're gonna be implementing.
Yes, I would add one more thing to that, Paul. I think the sharing of the knowledge outside of these rooms, Because I saw people raise their hands when the question was about Zooks and autonomous vehicles and things of that nature. We get it, and we understand it, a lot of us in this room, but that is not the common sense abilities outside of these walls. And so the projects that we're doing around the country, we should continue through CoMotion and other venues to share lessons learned, but more importantly, share what you're doing in terms of your deployments, because I'm taking that information and I'm sharing it with stakeholders in our community, which is, look, what we're doing here in Jacksonville, we might be on the front edge of this, but there are other communities right behind us who are following in suit to create greater mobility in their community. We just had a delegation of VIPs from Atlanta the day after we cut the ribbon on our facility, because they're looking at using autonomous vehicles in certain parts of their community. They feel that that's a solution, not necessarily replacing their transit system, but complementing their transit system, and see this as an option for greater mobility at a much more effective and modern price point.
If I could jump in as well. And number one, congratulations.
Thank you.
So we worked together when
Yes,
I was a political appointee in the last administration, and of course NHTSA.
Yes.
It's amazing to see the progress that's been made. Also want to say thank you for your advocacy for the technology, for your understanding of how important it is to engage the community. There is concern, I agree.
Yes.
I would argue two things. Number one, at Zooks, before we ever put a vehicle on public roads, including our test fleet vehicle, which is here in Miami, we take the time, we meet with state regulators, city officials, the community where we plan on providing our service. We have multiple teams here, Cheyenne, Comms, we have Phil and Gina, city policy team. We engage the community. We meet with law enforcement. We host first responder trainings. They get in the vehicle, they kick the tire, they ask questions, they raise concerns. We believe all that must be done before you ever see our vehicle. Our goal is, by the time you see this beautiful vehicle, because it is beautiful, and I can talk about that more shortly, ground up, purpose built, designed for cities. 100 safety innovations you will not find in a car today. But before we even do any of that, we want to make sure we have built the relationship with the community. That is our goal. No surprises, full transparency. And I would also argue, in the companies that are here today, and it's a small number of us, to be honest with you. I've been in this since 2015. I was with Andrew Cuomo back then, and companies wanted to test in New York City or San Francisco 1. But there were a lot more. Many of those companies treated this like a sprint as opposed to a marathon. And if you treat it like a sprint, you're gone. Most of those companies are gone, including one in the last year. So it's a very thoughtful process that we go through at Zooks. There's also an issue that I know we don't have time to talk about, but the technology. You have ADAS technology and you have ADS technology, automated driving systems. I think Americans are confused. They think they get into their vehicle, I'm not going to name a brand, and they think that vehicle is full self-driving. And that's where some of the concern is coming from. And so I do look to elected officials, regulators, to really do a better job explaining the difference in the technology. Because again, a level 2 vehicle, where you have to drive the vehicle, you have to pay attention to what the vehicle is not an automated vehicle. Right. And that's another issue of concern.
All right, we got about 20 minutes left, 25 minutes. I have a bunch more questions to ask them, but I'm going to ask you all. We got the experts up here. You all have been staring really intently. I feel like somebody, one or two, might have a burning question you want to get out now. So let's take one or two hands, and then we'll go back to my pre-prepared questions. John Rassant, the founder of CEO of CoMotion, has a question for us. All right, John.
Thank you. Really stimulating discussion. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, Ron, something about the recent changes in NHTSA regulations regarding precisely level 2. And just, you mentioned quite rightly that safety is at the center of everything you do, which it should be. But here we have NHTSA relaxing essentially the reporting requirements for crashes and things like that. So I wonder if you could comment on that. And then the sort of second part of my question, just maybe a little bit a second question, because it's not exactly related, is do you think that in this country we have federal regulatory regime, state regulatory regime, city regulations, et cetera, is that really optimal for rolling out autonomous services in our cities, which I agree we need. I mean, we need for all the reasons that you talked about, Javier. So, over to you.
I figured I'd get the hard question from John.
No, that's I'm glad you're here, Ron.
Yeah, let's start with winning this race. I'm going to answer it like that. I would argue, as of 2025, the U.S. is still leading this race with deployment of this technology. We have the best companies, we have the best technology right here in the United States. That's not a given. We're in a race against China. What we have right now in the United States is a patchwork approach because we don't have a federal framework. I've been working on trying to get a federal framework in place since 2016. The federal government's responsibility, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the federal regulator of autonomous vehicles, is the design, the construction, and the performance of an automated vehicle. The state role is the operational safety of the vehicle on public roads. The city, in most cases, the city does not have a regulatory role. The city's role is that critical partner. We want to know how we can help cities address mobility challenges. That's important to understand. Right now, though, we have a model where you have some states getting into areas, for example, design requirements of a vehicle. Now imagine that. Imagine state A has a particular design requirement, state B has another type of design requirement, state C has another design requirement. We're not going to win this race. We're not going to win this race like that. So let's get to this administration, your first question. We are optimistic that we have an administration that is moving in a thoughtful but a swift manner to ensure that we have the regulatory framework in place to ensure American AV companies, we build our vehicle here, made in America, right in California. We're not importing our vehicle from China. We're creating jobs. This administration is putting in place that framework to be successful. So at the end of the day, we are extremely optimistic what we're hearing from Washington. Now, we need Congress to act, to pass a law, to put in place this regulatory framework, and we will also continue to work with states on the operational safety piece of this.
Good one. Tell us about Hold On. What's going on with Hold On? You talk about bringing it to America, yeah.
I think Ron brought up the issue. I'd say midway through development of our project, it became clear to us that there was no Buy America compliant purpose-built vehicle. And so we had to make an immediate pivot to develop, and I'm 100% supportive of Buy America, Build America. It makes perfect sense. And in our particular case, what we were able to do in partnership with Ford Motor Company is to use the Ford E-Transit van platform. It added more time to our schedule in terms of development of the vehicle, but we actually retrofitted we're retrofitting Ford E-Transit vehicles to actually operate and deal with some of the regulatory requirements in terms of crashworthiness, roadworthiness, things of that nature. But with that comes a public challenge, which is, okay, I showed in those very early deployments these very sexy, modern-looking autonomous vehicles, and then lo and behold, here I come back a few years later with a Ford E-Transit, and so dealing with the public on that is something that we're dealing with back at home. But in any case, going through that process, we didn't stop there. We did recognize that there were a number of foreign manufacturers who were working in the space, developing purpose-built vehicles, and they were looking for an opportunity to get into the United States. I remember distinctly being in Madrid at a UITP conference where we were presenting on the U2C project, and we got tapped on the shoulder by the Benteler Corporation. Benteler is about a 150-year-old German manufacturing firm company. Its annual revenues are in the $7 to $8 billion range on an annual basis. So they're pretty stable. They're not your run-of-the-mill kind of garage developer. And in this particular case, they heard about our project, and we started engaging in conversations. They created a subsidiary called Holon, which is developing. It originally was the Holon Mover. More recently, they called it the Holon Urban. It seats about 20 passengers, and it's a purpose-built autonomous vehicle, and they selected Jacksonville, Florida, to be their manufacturing plant in the United States. So this project in Jacksonville has gone much further than we ever imagined, where it's now creating jobs and economic opportunity in our community. They're making about a $100 million investment in building the plant. UNF economic impact study, the math on the plant alone is about $200+ million in economic impact with jobs as well as support for manufacturing the plant. And then every year after that, about $100 million in annual revenues if they get up to their full production capacity, which will be between 5,000 and 10,000 units per year. We actually made it a bit easier for some of our colleagues around the country. We did a statewide procurement for autonomous vehicles and put in the piggybacking clauses that allow any governmental entity, city, transportation authority to take advantage of our actual contract, thereby also accelerating sales in terms of Holon. So there's,
good, man.
It's
I was
all
in
good.
one. It's great.
It's
And
good, yeah.
last night we were at Pininfarina for the, and they designed that thing,
Yeah,
right?
Pininfarina
I mean,
designed
this
it.
thing is sharp looking.
Yes, and so
Yeah.
we're very excited about the outcome, but even with that, you would think that project smooth sailing, everybody's happy. In Jacksonville, I still have some folks who are saying, how did you promise me this and you gave me that? But we're going to get to the Holon vehicle probably in another 2.5 years when they're in full production. Our plan is for them to replace the actual Ford E-Transit conversion vehicles, and then we will also look at paratransit and microtransit opportunities in Jacksonville. So reservation for 100 vehicles. So I put my order in, and you better hurry up and put yours in.
Who wants to get the next batch? Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, great times.
All right, Jerice, last question for you. Give us whatever else you have to say on paratransit when it comes to that. Really what I want to know is, how are we going to do it with people with wheelchairs? You going to be able to use that, or just ambulatory folks?
No, I think we can have this technology and AVs for everybody. I think it's we redefine the role of the operator. We can have everybody. And of course now we think maybe with the technology that we have now, we think there will be paratransit interactions that we won't be able to replace or model, but I think that we're wrong. I think if we just change and the role of the driver, we can include everybody. I know there has been research in accessibility and automation, and I know that it's limited, but we are working on that. FTA has been doing that kind of research for a couple of years and decades now, and I think we're gonna get there. And what we need to think about, and what we're doing now, is seeing what we need, like automatic doors, like automatic ramp lift operation, like I would say some detection, obstacle detection system that tells you when something is in the aisle, some removal system that helps you to clean the aisle or the circulation for the paratransit users. There would be always way to help and make it possible. I think we have to start thinking this like an opportunity for many to increase the service, not to put it like a limitation. There is always, we are good on that. We can find the ways to make it most accessible, and this is the moment. I think we have now the ways to fundamentally change mobility, especially change paratransit. And we have the means, and we need to use it, and this is the time. If we miss this train, we will miss this opportunity. I think this is the moment. And for us as a public servant, it's our responsibility to get involved with autonomous vehicles, embrace it, and use it, and start thinking about how we do these vehicles and the designs more exclusive, more accessible. And I think if we start early in the design and everything, and if we involve the community, including, for example, in our projects, we're involving families that came with kids that needed to have a seatbelt or car seat, and broad ideas and questions that are very good, that they inform the process. And if we do that, we're going to have technology there. But we need to start involving paratransit very early in the process and the community in general. And I think we have the means, and this is the moment to do it.
All right, Ron, last question for you from me is how does Zoox approach collaboration with public agencies and transit systems to ensure AVs integrate into and don't disrupt the broader mobility ecosystem?
That's a great question. Again, I'm a transit guy too. First car was 2020. Just like with law enforcement, we see that relationship with transit agencies as being critical. We look at cities with a strong transit backbone. Transit should be the fundamental way of the way people move in cities at the end of the day. We're not going to replace, I also spend a lot of time in DC, so the red line, DC, you're not going to have autonomous vehicles replacing a major subway line. It's not going to happen. We complement public transit. Remember what I said earlier. You're not going to have to drive your personal automobile into cities. You're going to use the whole ecosystem of urban mobility, and that includes public transit at the end of the day. So, I think that relationship with public transit is absolutely critical. I do want to, because we're almost out of time, and this is always a fun conversation, but I always like to end it with safety is foundational. And what we're doing is we're putting technology on public roads. We at Zoox, we say we have to earn the right. Earn the right. That means we will work with regulators, we work with state and city officials, we work with the community. Full transparency, no surprises. That is fundamental at this company. So at the end of the day, our goal is to address that concern issue that you raised earlier. I've seen it firsthand. Go to San Francisco, and we have another company that's carrying a lot of people every week. And the excitement that I see, and when I see the excitement about our company, cities are ready for this technology. And so it's been a pleasure to be here and to be part of this conversation. It is an incredible future. And again, this conference right here, this is a leading voice in this space. So congratulations, John. Thank you.
That's great. In just a few minutes, we're going to unveil, John Rassant, my partner in crime here, and I are going to unveil the new logo and the new rebranding for the Transit Unplugged podcast and TV show. But I'm going to give Nat Ford a chance to kind of wrap it all up. Nat, where are we at now? Where are we going?
Well, Paul, in terms of where we're going, I'm not exactly sure, but I think where we're at right now, we're at a very critical point. These new technologies that are coming on board, it's really, we talk about the technology, but it's really about people. And it's about moving our communities in a very efficient and effective way and allowing people to achieve their dreams. I mean, getting to that educational opportunity, getting to the doctor's office, getting to that job that's across town. And for, in my particular community, we're 870 square miles in terms of Jacksonville. So largest geographical city in the country. And so quite often in the transportation spaces, we talk about first mile and last mile. In Jacksonville, it's the first 5 miles and the last 5 miles. And I can see it, having worked and lived in other cities, how that has been such a barrier for certain members of our community. And through this technology, it'll give us the opportunity to not have a one-size-fits-all approach of a 40-foot bus or a 75-foot rail car. This allows us to reach into those corners and pockets of our community that haven't been reached before. I think there's educational opportunities for, our students, our young people. Some of our agile plans in this space have been with the elementary and middle schoolers and high schoolers. And just the jobs that they'll be able and the opportunities they'll have with these new technologies going into the future is far beyond what we originally imagined with the basic autonomous vehicle project and moving people. This has really put the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, and I would say anybody's, particularly on the authority or agency space, it got us into discussions far beyond mobility. It got us into economic development, it got us into education, land use discussions and things of that nature. So this has probably been the crowning project in terms of my career over 4 decades, having an opportunity to be on the cutting edge of building something, and more importantly, providing transportation and mobility for my community. So something that I'm very proud of my staff about. It takes a lot of courage, takes a bold vision, takes a lot of courage, it takes a hell of a lot of resilience, because again, we are building something that doesn't have any guideposts or any reference standard. And so when we talk about policies, we're trying to find that, thread that needle to be autonomous and at the same time not deliver the same thing that has been in place for the last 50 years. And so that's kind of the challenge, and a testament and tipping of my hat to the leadership team at the JTA that's been working on this project.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
No, wait a minute. 4 decades. Would you start when you were 5?
Yeah. Too young. I was, way too young. Yeah, way too young.
Well, thank you all very much. It's a great discussion about an important topic. It's something that I get the pleasure to do on a regular basis, is talk to leaders like this on the Transit Unplugged podcast. I started this thing 8 years ago working for Modaxo. If this works, I'll show you what it looks like. Let's see if it works. Or they can just roll it from up there. There we go. All right. Oops. You saw it too soon. There we go. All right. So look, I just left being the CEO of Baltimore when I came to work for this company 8 years ago, Trapeze, then now work for the parent company, Modaxo. And they said, would you like to start a podcast? And I said, yeah, I would. I'd love to. I did radio part-time during my whole career, 16 years. I had a show called Conference Corner, and I knew exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted to talk to CEOs like Nat and give them the opportunity to tell their own story. Because having just left being a CEO in Baltimore, I knew the only time really that we normally got a chance to talk in the media to the public was when there was a crisis, right? And you got to respond real time to a bus accident or a derailment or a terrible storm. And that's not really a great story for transit. And I'm a transit evangelist. I want us to be seen in the most positive light possible. And so I wanted to give CEOs a chance to do. And that's what we've done. For 8 years, Transit Unplugged podcast. We've won the APTA Awards, a bunch of other stuff. We're heard in 100 countries. People are interested. We hit a good model. People are interested in hearing CEOs talk about public transit. Nat's been on a couple times. He's been on our TV show. Think about that. All the great things he's doing. We're making transit sexy again, baby. And it was back in the 50s. Remember? Remember when everybody rode transit in the 50s? You all are too young. You don't remember. I'm too young, too. I don't remember that. But it was big back then. And then we wanted to take the message beyond people that were just interested in transit and make transit sexy for the masses. So we started a travel show. Think Anthony Bourdain meets public transit. That's what our show is, Transit Unplugged TV. Jaime Quadra is our video director and my creative director here. We started this program. Our company funded it all. We go around to a different city around the world every month, and we showcase the food, fun, and culture of Miami. 2 weeks ago, of Detroit. 2 weeks before that, of Las Vegas, baby. I mean, we have a ball, too. It's a great lifestyle, too. But we go to all these cities. We showcase all the fun things to do there. And then we say, aha, but you don't need to rent a car. And you don't need to get a taxi cab. You can ride public transit. Did you know how? Let me talk to the CEO. Let me talk to this person. And let us show you how to ride. That's what the TV show has done. It's been a massive hit. We have millions of views on YouTube. Just last week, we got picked up by 13 PEG channels, public education and government channels. We made it available to the public for the first time, to these government channels, and they're picking it up. We're on 3 or 4 major digital platforms, Amazon, this, that, and the other. And so it's exciting times. The 8th year, I don't know if you're into numerology, but I am. 8th year is a number of new beginnings. So we wanted to evolve what we're looking for. Plus, we just hired like one of America's top podcast editors. This guy's name is Chris, and he is fantastic out of LA. You're going to hear all kinds of interesting things coming out of us soon. Anyway, we wanted to make a change in our review, and I'm going to ask at this point John Rassant to come up and talk for just a minute about what he's seen from his third-person perspective, and then I'm going to show you, if you didn't see it already, what it's going to look like and what it means. John, come on up. Let's welcome John.
I'm not sure
I should do this because, as you might know, I think you do know that we have our own podcast, Fast Forward, and you're very stiff competition. In fact, you're not competition because you really dominate the space in a marvelous way, and I'm a very keen listener. So I really love what you're doing, and I hadn't heard that you're the Anthony Bourdain of public transit, but that's something that's going to stick, I think, and it really makes perfect sense. So I want to really commend you and your team for putting this out week after week. It's really tremendous. And the only thing I would urge is you to maybe go beyond the United States. I know you have.
Yes.
But I think I would urge you to do that more because there's so much that's happening in Europe and Asia in the public transit realm that I think we here in the United States can learn from. So thank you very much. And let's have a look at the new branding.
Are we ready? Drum roll. Here we go. All right. This is the new Transit Unplugged logo. We've turned the microphone into a chat bubble because that's what people are doing now, right? And we're on all the major platforms. I got a lady in London that does all of our social media. She's got us on everything. She cuts up our TV shows and puts it out. That's what the podcast is going to look like, effective today. And that is what the TV show logo is going to. Isn't that cool? Transit Unplugged TV. And listen, that's what it's going to look like when it's on screen. So the TV shows are, we have to do what's called a thumbnail, right? So you've got the handout showing something. Those are samples. That's what the podcast will look like on the left. It's going to go from a red background to a blue background and kind of updated graphics. If you don't listen or watch, take a snap of that QR code right now. That'll take you to our page where you can pick, the podcast. You can listen to it on all the platforms. We're on like 25 platforms, but the videos are on YouTube, is where you can get them. Snap it, subscribe, share it with your friends. This is a way that all of you can do what these guys have done today, which is become mobility evangelists. We want all of you to join us in spreading the news about transit. It's fun, it's great, it's interesting, it serves a city. You don't have to get a taxi cab. You can ride public mobility. Thank you all for this. Let's give our panelists a great round of applause. Thank you for being with us.
And stay put, we have our next panel starting in a few moments, which will be the realities of taking off, which will be focusing on advanced air mobility, autonomy, and how we move forward in public-private partnerships. So once again, Paul, thank you so much. So excited about the new Transit Unplugged.
Watch out.
Oh, yeah.
When you trip over it. Thank you.
Okay, if I can ask you to leave this. We're going to start with the next panel. Great. And now to moderate our next panel, if I can ask you just to all sit down, have a seat. If I can all ask you to have a seat, we'll be starting with our next panel. I will welcome on stage Keith Caswell, Director of the Department of Economic Innovation of the City of Miami. Keith, over to you. Do you want to...
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, we promised not to delay libations a little too long, but hey. So Leiden, if you can come up. Jock, Pete. Dan, go ahead. Ryan? Well, some water for you? I guess I'm standing. Some water? You guys want water? Some water? Okay. Sorry, I missed the call. Hey, Dad. Sorry, I missed it. I didn't work. I'm heading back tonight, so I'll see you. You always need a little bit of a buffer between. All right, I guess we can kind of get started here. A little improvising a bit, so I'll be standing. Wasn't planned, but that's okay. We're resilient and we'll figure it out, right? My name is Keith Carswell, Director for the Department of Economic Innovation Development with the City of Miami. Happy to be here. And to my immediate left, Ben. Name, title, and tell us what you do.
Sounds good. Ben Limmer, I am Chief of Public Transportation with the Connecticut DOT up in New England. The state DOT up there does run and manage, oversee the transit system, both bus and rail.
All right, Pete.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pete Van Os. I have the pleasure of being the head of resilience and incident management at Waymo.
And if I could trouble you to keep it down a little bit in the back, please. If you can keep it down a little bit in the back, please, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, so in that role, I manage the end-to-end response for off-nominal events that may occur, and also the first responder outreach program that we have, which partners with first responders across the globe to safely deploy our technology in the areas we operate.
All right.
I'm Jacques Coulon, Mobility and Innovation Manager with the City of Orlando. So my group, we look at connected autonomous vehicles, advanced air mobility, mobility as a service, micromobility, basically all the new mobilities. So I get to work on all the fun stuff for the City of Orlando.
I'm Leiden Sleeper with Joby Aviation. I'm the U.S. lead for strategic policy. They tend to send me into early markets and figure out the local regulatory environments. And Joby Aviation is a electric aerial mobility company. We have an eVTOL, so our aircraft takes off and lands just like a helicopter vertically, and then transitions into wing-borne flight. And we want to run an air taxi service starting in the next couple of years.
All right. Well, that's a perfect segue about taking off, because that's what this panel is about, the realities of taking off. So in the context of this discussion in the panel, share with us what do you see are some of the challenges and realities of taking off?
So I think in the early years, the thing that is most interesting is that every market is totally different. I mean, I think we heard a lot about that in the last panel, and it is certainly true. And in the world of electric aviation, so much of the regulatory environment we're creating now. There's a lot that we get to plug into in terms of the airspace, the national airspace system, but everything from local regulations, state regulations, to federal regulations are being rewritten to think about the inclusion of advanced aerial mobility. And then working at a local level to think about where are we going to take off and land, where are we going to bring people to and from, are we going to launch with people or goods? There's a lot that we're just paving a path on, and everything is brand new, and I think that's fun and exciting, but definitely makes for an interesting hustle over the last couple of years.
So Jacques, from a city's perspective, I can chime in on that, but I'm going to let you do it because I'm just moderating. But what are some of the challenges that you've experienced from the city's perspective?
Well, specific to advanced air mobility is learning. Aviation is not something that at the city level we've had to deal with historically. We have our traditional airports. We've got great staff at the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority that we really look to them to handle operations there, but bringing vertiports, the places where these aircraft will take off and land, into our city centers, our neighborhoods, it's a lot of learning. So it's leaning on a lot of other partners, so whether it's the Jobies and the Whisks and those folks, or it's the vertiport construction folks, it is a lot of learning. And then also bringing that out, not only so the city of Orlando is lucky that we have staff dedicated to this, a lot of localities don't, but this is a regional transportation option. So it has to be discussed regionally, and so we need to bring our partners at the county, other counties, metropolitan planning organizations all together to really get into this and talk from the same set of understandings. So that's been the biggest challenge.
Now, Pete, we've talked about some of the challenges, but you guys are like in it, and you guys are doing it at Waymo. So again, what are some of the realities of taking off, or challenges that you guys have experienced that you care to share?
Yeah, thanks. Waymo is taking off. 250,000 paid rides per week, driving more than 1 million miles a week. We offer a commercial service in Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, rolling out to new markets very shortly in Atlanta. Next year will be DC announced so far, and of course Miami. We're here mapping in Miami currently. So I want to talk more about the realities of that takeoff. So we are taking off, but the realities are more challenging. And that just requires a full dedication, cultural, technological, operational to safety. There's no way we can do this in any of the spaces without being safe, and that's foundational at Waymo. From the very beginning in 2009, when we started as the Google self-driving car project, safety is critical to us, and we embody that in every way we do when we roll out. So that's across all industries and all of these modes of transportation. It's one thing to take off, and it's another thing to do it responsibly, safely, and transparently.
All right. So Ben, you want to kind of chime in to close us out on that question?
Absolutely. Great segue as far as the taking off comes into play. I mean, first of all, public transportation agencies can, they can take a little time to evolve and change. To say the least, I'm being kind. I'm trying to be kind to all of my fellow public sector folks in the transit space.
Those are the bureaucrats, not us, right?
Definitely not us up here. But yeah, I mean, just staying nimble and looking at transit options that are safer, more efficient, really better for the end user, which is of course the customer. Also, this whole integration of automation and AI, I mean, that's going to be just absolutely critical to the future. And then, of course, making sure that we have the local and federal funding to support many of these things. So, I think we went through several administrations in a row where it was a really good thing for the public sector to be the loudest voice in the room as far as what financial resources are needed or policy relaxation, things like that. This is my 2 cents, I do think we're entering a place where the private sector needs to be the loudest voice in the room. So that's kind of my call for help. And then last but certainly not least, I know that Nav Ford from Jacksonville was just up here, something he's just done a masterful job of. He's not even in here to hear this, but really building public support and a very positive brand around what the future holds with regards to automated technologies for transportation.
Okay. So Leiden, when it comes to implementation for AAM, right? What are some of the biggest challenges? Is it in terms of land use, power, public acceptance? I think Ben kind of chimed in on a bit.
It's sort of going back to my original, or the point from the first question. Everything is so bespoke that every market has wildly different challenges, right? So take New York City and the tri-state area, for example. Very robust vertical lift industry. There's a lot of helicopters flying around every day. The Joby aircraft is whisper quiet when it flies overhead and is quiet when it takes off. So we can offer a benefit and an opportunity for people who don't like loud helicopter noise. From a community engagement perspective, that is a very clear path where we get to talk to people who don't like helicopters flying over their head and say we might be a better alternative. But if you go to a market where there's not a lot of vertical lift and it's a different environment, now we're introducing something new. Very, very different type of challenges. Same thing on the infrastructure perspective. You have some markets with lots of places for us to take off and land, and then some places where you literally have to write new codes and new rules for heliports and communities that really want the service. So the challenge that we're seeing now is that each one of the potential early markets that we go into has wildly different communities, community hopes and dreams, rules and regulations, and you require very specialized local expertise. And hopefully, as we roll out service in early places, we'll be able to learn and have a little bit more of a roadmap that we can apply to lots of different places. But that bespoke nature is so unbelievably different in different areas that it really requires hyper expertise in a relatively small number of early markets.
So Chuck, how is Orlando preparing for AAM implementation, and also as you all move along this path, what are you finding to be the most important partnerships along that journey? And talk a little bit about the partnerships as well.
Yeah, so what we've done is we have an advanced air mobility master planning effort that we've undertaken for several years. We were hoping it'd be done by now, but things keep changing and evolving in industry, which is good because we keep learning new things about how the aircrafts will operate, but also we get new regulations from FAA, and so that's part of it is being nimble. Has been part of what we've been doing, but a lot of it is to what you were mentioning about partnerships. The city is under with NASA cohort on community integration, so we're looking with other regions at noise profiles and how do we really, what do cities and regions need to know for noise, for community integration. We're also on a working group with the World Economic Forum from the economic side of it, while we are not the ones that'll be doing, we don't have to make the business case, we have to be able to support the overall ecosystem. And so understanding from that aspect has been really important for us. And then with the workforce, working with and reaching out to our universities, our other community partners on, okay, these are the types of things that we hear will be needed for aviation, the future of aviation, whether it's UAS or AAM. A lot of it is the same as what we're seeing for connected autonomous vehicles in terms of, for a time being, okay, the vehicle itself is handling most operations, but there is somebody there available in a room somewhere to take over or to respond to these issues. So really understanding what those workforce needs are, and then working with a lot of our industry, our community education partners to make sure that this Orlando area has that job, those folks that are ready for those jobs available. And then finally, working and advocating at the state level. We, as a city, we have only so much resources. The state has more. Everybody wishes they had even more, but we want to, while exactly what you said, each city is very different in our goals and our objectives, but we all have common needs, whether it's from certain standardizations or those types of things. So really advocating through the Florida Department of Transportation Advanced Aviation Advisory Group. I think that's what it's called now. It keeps changing names, but really advocating for, and we see it as not advocating just for the city of Orlando, but for all other cities, and using those other methods and groups to really coalesce around certain standards to make it easier. There will still always be certain intricacies for each city, but the more that we partner with industry and different groups, the easier it will be to get a company to come make investments in the city of Orlando, as well as for us to connect to other regions and areas that we want to connect to.
Great. So much of the conversation, really, particularly in respect to AAM, has been around preparing for the infrastructure. From vertiports, vertistops, power consumption, how large is the platform and stuff. But one thing that Waymo's proven in companies like Waymo, because most of the conversation around future mobility talks about infrastructure, but you all are operating within the existing road system, and so how are you using your technology to kind of integrate seamlessly within the existing infrastructure? And so talk a little bit about that and how you evolve along that journey.
Yeah, so we're operating today, a commercial service today, so we don't have time to wait. And from the very beginning of development of our vehicle, we plan to operate on the roads today, not for the infrastructure tomorrow. How do we do that? So in cities like Miami right now, we are mapping, we're out there looking with vehicles, manually driven configuration, driving around, looking at all the intricacies of Miami, noticing the driving style, which is unique, and I can say that because I live here. So we take note of that. But what we're looking for are changes, right? We want to generalize as much as possible across all these different areas, but there are novel things in each market. So we look at the pickup and drop-off locations and what might be different here in Miami versus, say, San Francisco. We look at street signs. Maybe they look different. Maybe the first responder vehicles, which is something very important to me, maybe they look different. Maybe they're green instead of red, in the case of ambulances sometimes. So we take all that into account, and that's how we use the existing infrastructure and integrate that into our software. There are certain things that, of course, would make the deployment faster, right? Great connection, great cellular connection, Wi-Fi speeds, et cetera. Obviously, that enables rapid data uploads. That's much faster. It's efficient for us to get the data off the vehicle, to communicate with the vehicle. And of course, we operate a fully electric fleet, so we need charging. So in order to deploy a fleet quickly, we need more power. So is it stopping us now? No. But could we go faster if we had the right power? Yes, that makes it a lot easier.
You touched on it a little bit about EMS, and could you talk a little bit about what you all are doing in terms of acquainting cities and municipalities and our law enforcement with your vehicles? Because, you know, police officer pulls up to the side of the road, or the vehicle pulled over, and they go and tap on the window. The window doesn't come down, but they look in the vehicle and they don't see someone sitting in the driver's side, you know? So.
Yeah, so I always say we never want to meet a first responder for the first time on the side of the road. And it's kind of a joke, but you know, we really take this seriously. It's foundational and fundamental to our growth as a company and everything we do, and the safety aspect of it, making sure we have this relationship with first responders. Not just when we need them, but proactively. So before our vehicles even reach town, wherever that new city is going to be, I have a team that goes out and trains first responders. We've trained over 20,000 to date across the US and globally now. And those trainings look like we bring a vehicle to them, we explain our technology, explain the sensor suite so they really understand the behavior of the vehicle. And we help them understand that this vehicle actually and this technology makes their jobs safer and easier. It's not going to make it more difficult. But again, it's about getting that communication out to them early, and so they know what to expect, and transparency into how to interact with the vehicles. They can use a number of different ways to communicate with us, and a real-time person should there be a collision, and that's something I manage on my team. So that's extremely important to us.
All right. So Ben, while we're staying grounded, okay, Connecticut is leading the country with the first full-size autonomous buses on the CT fast track. There you go, corridor. And from your perspective, what lessons are you learning that could apply to scaling advanced air mobility and other solutions or connected vehicles across other transit systems?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We are learning every day, every week about implementing this automated bus project on our fixed guideway BRT line. It's called CT Fast Track. It does connect Hartford 10 miles to the southwest to a town called New Britain. First of all, it's the safety and standards. How do you really establish clear safety requirements? And then how do you build the necessary policies surrounding those? I think there's been a few other things that have been brought up throughout this question. Obviously, financial support at the state and local level, but also the federal level, making sure you get public buy-in and confidence, because honestly, we get one shot to do it right with them. And this is our shot, and we really need to capitalize on it. The workforce piece that you brought up is absolutely huge. Whether it's workforce to support the technology, but also on a day-to-day basis. One thing that we're really in the weeds of right now is what exactly, how do you define liability under different situations? as well as how do you really drill down into what safety means for who, not only the employees, but the equipment as well and the surrounding operation. And speaking of operations, it's obviously being able to provide a much more efficient and effective transportation option when we do launch this whole pilot project. So, what do you do when you get up to a intersection where there's going to be, single occupant vehicles crossing? Or how do you make an unprotected left? And kind of all those urban movements are things that we are going to need to work through.
Okay. Well, sounds like you guys are building the bus as you're driving along the process, in a sense.
There's a lot of that, and we are first. And for somebody who is both impatient and doesn't necessarily like to go first, this is uncharted territories, both for me and the state of Connecticut. But we're going to give it a shot.
Well, that's the only way to lead, is to go out there and not be willing and being okay with maybe having a few hiccups along the way. But that's leadership, and so you guys are leading the country. So continue. But one of the things I'm kind of curious about is public acceptance. You see this bus pulls up and you have a prospective passenger decides to get on the bus, and it's an autonomous vehicle. How is all that working out in terms of perception and
Yeah, so, I mentioned we do get one shot. And with the public, and I think there was a panel in the early afternoon that talked a lot about being transparent. I think it was the Rich Davey, Collie Greenwood panel. In this particular technology and the pilot program that we have on the bus rapid transit line, transparency is going to be absolutely huge. Making sure that it's clearly communicated what we are doing, when we are doing it, and of course why. And then also, and this is something that we do on a day-to-day basis with our regular operations of our transit system, is finding out what is important to the customers, what is on their mind. And if you listen to what they have to say and make sure that their input is integrated into what you do. And then lastly, and I saw Nat did walk in, so I gave you a shout out a few minutes ago. But the one thing is that Jacksonville's doing, not to speak for them, but they're very clear about what the value of that particular project is. So that is the ultimate urban circulator. I live all the way, a third of the way across the country, and I think I can tell you what the value is of that particular project. So just making sure that we clearly communicate with our riding public.
Okay. And so this is for Pete and Leiden. And Jennifer's here. Hey, Jennifer, my assistant director for the department. So one of the things that we lean into in terms of, when I think about future mobility, right? Oftentimes people think about the technology, but I think about jobs that are being created. And particularly in this economy where people are concerned about AI taking someone's job, and I like to look at it from the standpoint that AI is not going to take anyone's job, but someone using AI will take your job. So it's like embracing the new technology. And so what skill sets are you guys thinking about for your respective companies as it relates to the future of mobility, the future of the workforce in mobility? Well, the future of the workforce in the future of mobility, I think is probably the question. And so what's Waymo's perspective, and then what's Joey's perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that comes up a lot. So Waymo directly provides, directly and indirectly, thousands of jobs. They're different jobs. They're new jobs, to your point, innovative jobs. From the technology, obviously the technology needs to be built. That's an engineering job. Once the technology is built and actually put onto the base vehicle, we need somebody to do that. So that's a new skill set to know how to upfit these vehicles and get them ready to be true autonomous vehicles. Once they go out the door, they need to be operated. So that means remote assistance functions, rider support functions, Waymo roadside assistance functions. We also have depots, and we partner with different companies which provide jobs, again, locally, to manage those fleets out of the depots, because our vehicles are very highly utilized, more than our normal vehicles that sit in our driveways overnight and for most of their lifetime. These vehicles are used all the time, which means they need to be cleaned, they need to be maintained, so that's more frequent. So they're coming back to the depot, and those are maintenance jobs. We even provide jobs for first responders who are retired, and a lot of them are now my team, which is wonderful, and they get to go out and talk to the industry that they came from with knowledge about how to interact with our vehicles. So a lot of innovative jobs coming up, both locally and centralized.
I mean, I think I have a lot of the same things to call out. Joby Aviation is a vertically integrated company. So we design, test, build, and then we'll operate the aircraft. So we have a facility out in California where we're literally putting the aircraft together. It is advanced manufacturing in every sense of the word. We're building the carbon composite frame for it. We're doing all the machining for all the parts that we need in the aircraft. We're assembling it. We're doing all of our test flights. That operation is out in California, and then we're going to build another bigger facility in Dayton, Ohio. So really thinking about the workforce from a manufacturing perspective is well underway. We're just under 2,000 employees right now, and most of them are focused on the OEM side and building the aircraft. And then as we think about our commercial launch, there's a lot of ways to think about Joby in the workforce ladder of aviation specifically. So we all know pilot shortage. Okay, interesting. Pilots will be trained on our aircraft and will be able to fly people, from point A to point B, or if it's a tourist flight, from point A to A, and then get their hours for their commercial pilot's license, and then maybe jump to some of the big airlines. Mm-hmm. Filling that missing rung in the economic development ladder is an interesting potential opportunity for Joby and aviation. We may get some people who say, you know what, I have a 9-to-5 job, I want to fly all around my community and my region, and that's great, and then some may jump. But really thinking about our place in that sort of missing rung in the economic development ladder, and then doing the outreach in the communities that we want to launch and serve in, and really trying to show people that we're not just trying to create a service and then fly over you. We really want to integrate into the community. New York City is an interesting early launch market. We have a partnership with Aviation High School, right? They're training aircraft maintainers today, and we're showing them the nuts and bolts of electric propulsion units instead of traditional engines. Starting that education now in the educational institutions in places where we want to launch will really give us that workforce development pipeline into us, and then allow us to fit into the larger aviation workforce development system in a way that certainly benefits us, because we'll have people come in, but we'll really be able to fill out that workforce development ladder that is so important in a healthy system.
Yeah, so that is so important when you talk about building that pipeline, the pipeline of talent. And I think sometimes it gets often overlooked. And this is the last question for Ben and Jock, but I'm going to have Ben close us out, but I'm going to ask you first. One of the challenges that we've had in terms of transportation, particularly when we think about these advanced technologies, is that oftentimes historically there have been communities that have been left behind in terms of transportation infrastructure. So as we think about the future mobility, as we think about these advancement in technologies, as we think about providing more convenient public transportation to just not low income individuals, but upper income households, because everyone likes the convenience of transportation. What is it that Orlando is doing to kind of ensure that some of these communities aren't left behind that have historically been left behind? And then we want to know then what Connecticut is doing as well.
So I think, if you think about it, just what you said. This is not a new challenge. If you think about the interstate highway system, that was a brand new innovation that unfortunately went through a lot of lower income disadvantaged communities. So we, as well as the partners that we've talked to and worked with, that's not what we want to happen here. So we are being very critical on how we think through the process of approving the location for these vertiports, thinking of them as, do you think of them as instead of a transit-oriented development, a vertiport-oriented development? Because there are some similarities there that you are bringing another transportation option to this location. You can co-locate other things with it, and including some of those last first mile facilities and all of that, and really thinking of it as an integrated option. Really for us, it's that workforce side of it is a big part to it. And it's not just these aircraft that are going to be electrified. It's traditional aviation that's becoming more electrified. It's UAS, it's drones, it's a lot of things that share a lot of common elements. Yes, Joby's aircraft is different than Eve's aircraft, which is different than, so on and so forth, but a lot of those skills are transferable. And the last thing I will say is all your transportation options, it's usually there's a choice between how much you're willing to pay, time savings, and convenience. So not everybody's going to be willing to pay on day one or maybe in day 100. I know people who would rather sit 20 minutes in traffic than pay 75 cents for a toll. So having another option for those, who are willing to pay, and then over time, who's able to pay will get larger. But really being thoughtful on the whole, not just the who can ride, but that ecosystem, and how do we really encapsulate opportunities for the neighborhoods around the vertiports, as well as the folks who are going to be servicing and working on the aircraft.
All right. Good.
Yeah, this has absolutely been a common theme or denominator throughout my own professional career. I mean, I've worked in communities where it was absolutely vital to the success not only of the community today, but as these communities continue to grow, attract jobs, and to really provide opportunities for upward mobility. So, I worked in Cleveland and worked on a major capital program there that was the primary goal, is a bus rapid transit system there. And then in Phoenix, connecting various communities that were often overlooked in one of the country's fastest growing metropolitan areas for a couple decades. I'm thinking of Atlanta, which unfortunately has a lot of positives going for it, but with that's a particular metropolitan area that grew up in a very segregated way, and it actually, I believe, even still today, leads the country in the lack of upward mobility. But public transportation plays a huge role in that. And then even the state where I work now, I mean, a lot of people maybe stereotypically think of Connecticut as a suburb to the city, and by and large, it is. But Greater Hartford, one of the points I was making this morning is the city of Hartford. 40% of the city's population is at or below the federal poverty line. So public transportation, in particular bus transportation, plays a huge role. So it's really up to us to make sure that the transportation options, whether it's an automated bus on a bus rapid transit line, whether it's in battery electric bus, or just kind of your regular fixed route bus service, making sure that it's clean, accessible, that it serves the customers that you are trying to serve when they are seeking to have transportation services, and then of course making sure that people just get to where they are trying to go on time. So great question and a good way to close. And Keith, I promise, since you were the moderator that was standing in between us and the happy hour, we would make you a hero, so we got time to spare. Take it away.
Literally standing between you and libations, right?
Yeah.
but want to give the panel a hand, because I think this is great. And I think if I could summarize, right, the realities of taking off are real and challenging, but it takes leadership like Ben and Jock from the public sector to be willing to get out front, to be willing to just have those hiccups and those challenges, those bumps along the road, no pun intended. But that's the only way that we're going to get there, you know. And also from the private sector, it's not just about providing AAM through Joby, just not about autonomous vehicles through Waymo, but it's also about building a pipeline for jobs. And so, if anything, the future of mobility is bright, it's challenging, it's undaunted, and it will continue to move forward for the benefit of the whole community. Thank you very much. Happy hour.